Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube, Thursday edition. Don't forget, we're Monday, 9 a.m., Thursday, 10:30 a.m. here for the offseason. Today, Sam, fun show. We did this last year. We're going to review last year's first rounders, the 2024 first round picks, go through what we saw from them as rookies and a little bit of an outlook for 2025. How you doing, man?
Doing well. How about you, Steve?
Doing great. I enjoy these, going back, we just talked so much draft, talking players and fits and everything. Let's go back and look. And if this does well, maybe we'll go back 2 years. Maybe we'll go back to 2023 again. Who knows? But just to get a little bit of a review of last year's first round picks.
Yeah, we crossed the 45,000 subscriber threshold the other day, so the numbers are still flying. If you haven't subscribed, hit the little subscribe button, the bell as well, because you never know when we're going to jump on, start talking George Pickens trades. Thanks to everyone that's already subscribed and get in there if you're not there already.
Yeah, if you're looking for the George Pickens news, we did that. We went live yesterday. We were supposed to take Wednesday off, and they make this trade. And so we broke that all down. It's all on the YouTube channel, Instant Reaction, George Pickens. Also, if you're listening on Spotify or watching on Spotify with the video, leave a comment, do all the stuff to push things forward on Spotify, because they said, hey, that helps. Talk to the Spotify people. So if you want to help the show, leave some comments, do all the stuff on Spotify. I appreciate it. All right, you ready to go?
Yep.
We're going to go pick by pick. I don't know how long this took us last year when we did it, but took us 2 hours to review every pick the first round, the other day. So let's go pick by pick and see how it goes. 2024 NFL draft. With the first selection, the Chicago Bears took Caleb Williams, the USC quarterback. What were your thoughts on Caleb Williams as a rookie? And certainly, looking at Ben Johnson, a new offensive line, new group of playmakers with Luther Burden in there, slightly different outlook here maybe for 25 for Caleb.
Yeah, I mean, I guess inconsistency is sort of the name of what we saw from Caleb Williams. First of all, it was kind of interesting. Like, pretty much from pillar to post, he was the consensus number one pick in that whole pre-draft process. At the very start, there were people being like, well, Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, they're 1 and 1A. There were definitely people that were on the Jayden Daniels thing as it got closer towards the draft, but I don't think anybody really, not anybody, there's always somebody, right? Like, there were people that had non-Caleb Williams number one overall picks in the pre-draft process, but pretty much pillar to post, he was the consensus number one guy. Obviously didn't play as the best rookie. Jayden Daniels, I think, was pretty clearly the best, but Caleb Williams wasn't even necessarily distancing himself from the rest of that group. So that's the first thing, is that as the number one consensus guy, he didn't play that way as a rookie. He was definitely not the best, and maybe not even the second best. I think overall, he was pretty inconsistent. There were definitely flashes of those crazy high-end plays that really typified his game at USC. Maybe not as many as I was expecting, particularly given there were some very early flashes of it. And you're like, wow, he's gonna be that again. We saw a lot less of that than I think I was expecting. Definitely saw some of that problematic, play under pressure. Took some bad sacks, was under pressure a decent amount. So I think generally an inconsistent season. I don't know now where his ceiling lies, given that kind of combination of factors.
It was a challenge to analyze last year as well, Sam, because we're always looking for patterns, and especially with rookies, you're always looking for this. Well, he turned a corner, therefore it'll be good from here on out. And that didn't happen. It was a nice pattern early on. The PFF grades, I think, tell a good story. A couple grades in the 40s, then he's up in the 60s, and then weeks 5 and 6 against a bad Carolina defense and against a bad Jacksonville defense, mind you, 72 grade, 87 grade. It's like, all right, has Caleb Williams turned the corner here? Then he goes into a 3-game lull from a grading perspective. Then he has 2 good games, a couple bad ones, a good one. It was just very much a roller coaster ride. I was getting very frustrated with Shane Waldron's offense. I thought there were times where the timing, the spacing, it felt like there were no backside options. It felt limited at times for Caleb Williams. And like you said, every time there were flashes was like, okay, this is the game. Like, he had 4 big-time throws against Detroit in week 16, 5 against Minnesota. Remember the number of throws that he made to take the week 12 Minnesota game to overtime. and to challenge this 14-win Vikings team. It's like, is this the tipping point here for Caleb Williams? So I thought he fluctuated between some of those natural instinct plays that we saw at USC and looking too mechanical and looking to like, hey, don't make a mistake. Don't make a mistake. Of course, he had that stretch from week 8 through week 16. He didn't throw an interception. Now, during that time, he had 7 or 8 turnover-worthy plays, right? So the freak thing. But overall, he did take care of the ball pretty well. Turnover-worthy play percentage was good. Where he was bad, though, the 68 sacks, 28% of his pressured dropbacks became sacks. That's an awful number. I don't have the ranking here, but that's usually if you're at 30, that's the worst in the league. 28's got to be right up there. So that's awful. You want to like cut that in half, basically. And that's something that often stays with you. So that's what I'll be watching for Caleb Williams. How does he handle pressure? And can he cut down on those negative plays? He didn't have the interception negative plays. He had the sack negative plays last year.
Yeah, the only player with a worse pressure to sack ratio last season was Will Levis. So that's the area that he was in terms of that behavior under pressure. It's a good. See, this is the thing. He's a really good example of like everything he did was like designed to screw up simple narratives, right? Nothing like people will try and give you the simple narratives of like, oh, well, they reached a point in the season where they said, look, just don't make mistakes. Just take the simple thing, don't turn the ball over. And that's why he went on that interceptionless run. And if you actually look more in depth, it's just not true. I mean, there were games where he did put the ball in harm's way a ton. There were games where he was super aggressive in terms of pushing the ball down the field. And, so this is not the play or the behavior of a guy who was told to just, keep it between the lines, don't do anything crazy, right? Like that's not what actually happened. That's just what the numbers would suggest if you were looking at the interceptions. So overall, I mean, that word I started off with, inconsistency, just sums up a season. Like you can find a stretch or a subset of plays where everything took place, like crazy decisions, amazing high-end stuff, aggression down the field, like pathological Alex Smithian, close to the line of scrimmage stuff. Everything is there on his tape and nothing consistently. So this is what this year is all about for Ben Johnson and the Bears and Caleb Williams is, all right, can we just be something for what? Like, I don't even care what it is at this stage. Let's just be one thing consistently for a while and see where we go.
What do you think this looks like with Ben Johnson now as we look forward to 2025? You have famously called Jared Goff a color by the numbers type of quarterback, or you've put him into that type of bucket, right? Is that a fair assessment of Jared Goff? You give him the reads, you set it up, he'll go through the reads, he'll hit the open throws. Is that a fair assessment of Goff? And that's what Ben Johnson's been working with?
Yeah, at times, certainly. I mean, look, this whole offseason has clearly been about let's get this offense where we want it to go. Let's massively upgrade the offensive line. That's another element of the Caleb Williams conversation, right? How bad was that offensive line versus how much was Caleb Williams making it look terrible by the way he holds onto the ball, by the way he takes sacks when he shouldn't, all those kinds of things. And that's a difficult question, right? Because it's a little bit of both. It's not 100% one, 0% the other. It's a mix somewhere, and playing with those percentages makes a huge difference. Either way, they've hugely upgraded it this year. They went after playmakers in the draft with Luther Burden and Colson Loveland. So all the things around Caleb Williams should be upgraded. Now we need to see what do you do?
Yeah, and my question for Caleb Williams is, how well will he play within structure versus outside of structure? The best stuff he did at USC was the stuff that you say Mahomes does really well. I'm just whispering that so not too many people hear me. But it's the instinctual part of the game, right? That's what I loved about Caleb Williams. I think that's what everybody appreciated about his game and why he was the number 1 overall pick. So to me, that's what I'm looking for 2025. The balance between, I think Ben Johnson, that offense will do a good job of scheming it up. They'll give him a certain number of open throws and looks that he has to take. And then when those aren't there, he certainly brings something that Jared Goff didn't bring to Ben Johnson's offense, which is the natural playmaking after the first and second read aren't there. So if we find that balance, then it's special. Yeah. And I can't wait to see how that plays out. It might take a while, but when they figure out that balance, that's where Caleb Williams has a chance to live up to that number 1 overall hype.
Well, this is the tightrope that you're walking in the modern NFL. Like there's a reason Patrick Mahomes wasn't the number 1 overall pick his year. It's because generally speaking, that style of play is not what results in the best quarterback in the NFL, right? It's a guy that wants to play that much out of structure typically is not able to do that consistently enough for that to result in like the best possible outcomes. Now, Mahomes obviously completely upended that logic, right? And suddenly you've got this guy who is able to do that consistently at an exceptionally high level. And because he's able to make those special plays, like the ceiling for him is almost so much higher than it is for anybody else. Josh Allen similarly is able to do that consistently. And suddenly you had a few quarterbacks who were able to do that time after time after time. But so I think now the NFL becomes a lot more willing to entertain that as a style, right? Like suddenly you've got Caleb Williams coming along. You're like, wow, if he hits the high end of outcomes, we're talking the same thing. We're talking all pro, Mahomes, Josh Allen, like these rivaling type quarterbacks. But it might not change like the fundamental truths, which is generally that's a really hard thing to be consistently really, really good at. And actually, you're still better trying to play from within the pocket as much as humanly possible, and then adding those special things on top of that when it breaks down, when you're forced to, rather than trying to play in the low percentage world all of the time just because you're capable of doing it. So this is where I think Caleb Williams, it's a challenge, right, for Ben Johnson to find where that optimal spot is, to dial it in just perfectly where most of the time he's playing in the paint by numbers world. And then when we need him to, he can go and do something crazy because he's one of the few guys that is able to do that.
All right, I think we're going to spend a little bit more time on the quarterbacks. Of course, there were 6 in the top 12. So let's go to pick number 2, Jayden Daniels. As you said earlier, clearly the top quarterback of this group, maybe the best rookie season that we've seen. I went back and looked at PFF grades historically. He's just below Russell Wilson's 2012. The caveat there, I think the PFF grades were bumped up a little bit during that 2012 season. So you could argue absolutely that Jayden Daniels had the best rookie quarterback season of any rookie over the last 10 plus years, or at least since the grading started. I think we saw that with our eyes. You could see with the numbers. They went to the Final Four in the NFC Championship. I mean, Jayden Daniels was fantastic. Before I dump cold water on that, Sam, do you want to describe, tell me about what you saw from him last year before we get into the Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend, and just figure out compare him to the other quarterbacks who also had great rookie seasons. What'd you see from Jayden last year?
So I think what was most impressive to me, I mean, we can, debate Jayden Daniels versus Russell Wilson's rookie year and all those kinds of things. I think what really characterized Daniels, though, is that by the time they got late in the year, into the playoffs, et cetera, Daniels was assuming a larger and larger responsibility and shouldering more of the burden than some of those other quarterbacks had in their rookie seasons. Now, I mean, even a guy like CJ Stroud, I think Daniels was doing more. Like he was the guy that was going, okay, I got this. I'm going to cook. I'm going to take control over this critical drive. Like I'm going to be the reason that we win the game. And there was a huge gap in talent, I think, between the Washington team and, Detroit, Philadelphia, like these teams that they were playing late in the season. And Daniels was like the only reason those games were close or that they were winning them at all. He was really impressive, like obviously poised, incredibly low turnover-worthy play rate over the course of his rookie season. Justin Herbert led the NFL for like 2 straight seasons with a turnover-worthy play rate of like 1.6%. Daniels last year was a 1.5. And it's not like he was doing that by, the Alex Smithian route, right? Not putting the ball in harm's way at all, being insanely conservative. Like he was being aggressive. He was pushing the ball down the field. He was taking one-on-one shots when they were there. And then, oh, by the way, he's also one of the most dynamic runners in the NFL right out of the gate. So I can't say enough about what Jayden Daniels looked like last season. Phenomenal rookie season right out of the gate. Phenomenal season, period. Forget rookie. I mean, just great quarterback season. And it's obviously only his first year, and they can hugely upgrade the talent around him. So I think Jayden Daniels completely changed the potential outlook for what he could be based off his rookie season. We've gone from being like, yeah, like he's talented, to now it's like he could genuinely be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for the next decade plus.
Yeah, I thought he looked like a future MVP. I thought what he did for Washington, and look, we've been doing this offseason team building and talking about, hey, Commanders are making great moves and everything. it's still not on paper a great roster, and it wasn't last year. They had a nice run, they had a nice stretch, but I thought Jayden Daniels was absolutely the glue there. His coming out party, I was there in person, Monday Night Football, week 3 against the Cincinnati Bengals, 21 for 23 for 254 in a game that was, look, it was one of the worst pass rushing games I've ever seen from the Cincinnati Bengals. Jayden Daniels had time, but the thing that happened with the game on the line where the Bengals said, we can't get any pressure, we're going to go all out blitz, and Jayden Daniels stares down the barrel, gets hit, and puts the ball into the mailbox, as JT O'Sullivan likes to say. One of the best throws you'll see all season. And that was just so impressive to me. And that was, I thought, typified Daniel's season. He had answers. And that's what, before I tell you about the other quarterbacks that maybe had good starts and then struggled in year 2, what gives me hope for Jayden Daniels for the future is he has answers. And what you talked about down the stretch was, remember how often Dan Quinn was going for it on 4th down and how aggressive he was? It's because you have Jayden Daniels and you have this QB-designed run game that you could build around because of his running ability. I think he's already become one of the best scramblers in the NFL from a feel perspective and just how to navigate the pocket and go get those yards. I thought that's why a big part of why his completion percentage was high. He completed 68% of his passes because I don't think he had to force throws. That's why the turnover-worthy play percentage was so low. He didn't have to force throws. When something wasn't there, he'd go pick up 5 or 6 yards and turn it into a positive play. And in addition to just being accurate, having the great deep ball that he showed at LSU. So I was incredibly impressed by Jayden Daniels. And then you just add a little bit of the touchy-feely, the clutch stuff, the big plays down the stretch in a whole lot of games. I thought he did some outstanding things. So
I think that rushing ability is potentially what insulates him from a real sophomore slump, the way some of these other quarterbacks have dealt with. Like, he broke 52 tackles with the ball in his hands. That's insane. Like, 2 quarterbacks broke more than 50 tackles. Jayden Daniels and Lamar Jackson. Those guys were basically double anybody else's figure. Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, those guys are in the 20s. Jayden Daniels and Lamar Jackson are up at 50. That, like, you can lean on that in a way the Texans can't really lean on that for CJ Stroud, right? When things start to go wrong, suddenly Stroud is under pressure from a game flow situation, from a game script situation, because now you're facing, these 3rd and longs. Now you're having to kick it away on 4th down. Washington can prop this offense up, even if things start to go awry a little bit, because you've got that 4th down aggression. He's in that Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson world where we can get free 1st downs on these tough situations because Daniels invalidates the defense, right? I have an extra threat that you don't have the cover for, and I can pick up 2 yards when we need it and keep this drive going. And that invalidates, a bad throw earlier on in that series, right? So he's got that working for him. I think that potentially insulates away from any sophomore slump, in addition to the fact that they've upgraded at a bunch of spots, right? They now have a way better left tackle than they had a year ago. They've brought Deebo Samuel into the fold. Right. Like, they've added weaponry to this offense that was already insane based off how good he was playing.
So let's go. Let me just go back through some of the other just using PFF grades as the baseline here. Here are the other top graded PFF rookie quarterbacks since 2012. Russell Wilson, who I mentioned. Now, Wilson in year 2, they won a Super Bowl in 2013. The knock, so to speak, on Wilson was, well, that's a Legion of Boom-led team. Marshawn Lynch was the ball carrier. Russ was well protected. He didn't have a whole lot on his plate. And I think that's fair, right? When you're breaking down Russell Wilson, I think he was outstanding early in his career and never really tapered off until year 8 or 9, whatever it was. But certainly he was a little bit more protected with the run game and defense, right? So that's Russ. Dak Prescott, 2016. Remember, he was so good then. He had a couple seasons where he tapered off 17 and 18 before he built it back up again. CJ Stroud, we're coming off of 2023, one of the better rookie seasons that we saw. And they did the same thing. Look, now they add Stephon Diggs. Now it's year 2 and all the defensive additions that they had. But his offensive line fell apart. He wasn't seeing it the same way, wasn't feeling it the same way. He had a bit of a sophomore slump. Baker Mayfield, 2018. His offensive line was rough in 2019. He gets much worse in 19, bounces back in 20. Remember, he was a roller coaster ride. RG3, the famous 2012 season where Kyle Shanahan is there and they take the league by storm with his zone running ability, zone read ability. And in 2013, coming off an injury, tries to become more of a pocket passer, never the same. And one other name I'll throw in there is Mac Jones. He had a really good 2021 season, especially the first 10 games. Already started to fall off a little bit at the end of his season. By 2022, I think the lack of tools and just general, I don't know, the league caught up to him more than anything, right? But again, I think Jayden Daniels, of all that group, has enough tools in the toolbox to maybe overcome it. But the one, the one thing I'll say for the people who are like, well, Jayden Daniels is clearly better than Caleb Williams. We're 1 year removed from, I think Bryce Young outplayed CJ Stroud last year. And that was a wild statement. If we said, when we were on the show last year at this time, it was like, maybe Bryce could figure it out. He was so bad. Stroud looks like the next big thing. And Bryce Young played better than CJ Stroud last year after getting benched. So these things happen, right? It's not always upward trajectory. I repeat that every year. I really love Jayden Daniels. I think he's going to be fantastic, future MVP candidate. But we've seen quarterbacks have great rookie seasons and taper off in year 2 before. So that's my only caveat with that analysis.
Sure.
All right, let's go pick 3. Drake Maye, New England Patriots. We're on pace for a 5-hour show, Sam. We got this. Drake Maye, number 3 overall. I thought the Patriots, here's my take on this. The Patriots did a great thing last year. Gerard Mayo is fired, but their staff, whether it was him or Elliott Wolf, the plan of starting Jacoby Brissett, but still giving Drake Maye the 30-40% of the reps early in the season as the backup, which is rare. They usually get 5% of the reps. I thought that was fantastic. And Maye came out into the worst situation in the NFL, offensive line-wise, pass catcher-wise, and held his own, made the Patriots not even somewhat competitive in a few games, which I thought was a huge win for Drake Maye.
Yeah, I mean, we said this the other day when we were talking about the Patriots and Drake Maye. Like, I don't know that we sort of respect enough just how good he looked despite what is a terrible situation around him, or what was last season. It is remarkable how competent and capable he looked, given that he had the worst receiver room and the worst offensive line in the NFL, I think, both at the same time around him. Like, the situation was so bad that I thought it was a mistake to put him into the starting lineup at all. I thought it would be damaging to play like 3/4 of the season basically within that environment. I was like, keep Brissett out there. You're not going to win games. You're not going to win games anyway. You're a terrible football team. You're on the way to one of the top picks in the draft. Like, just take the crappy season and build for Drake Maye next year. But they threw him out there, and he looked good. He was able to not just survive, but play well and not develop bad habits, like not clearly start getting worse because of the terrible situation around him. So I was really impressed by Drake Maye. Who knows how much of an impact getting the reps had, but I can't have hurt. I think it's a good idea that if you have a young quarterback like that, give them reps because they need the practice somewhere. If you're not playing them on Sundays, they're going to need them in the practice. So yeah, like, I think generally the Patriots had a smart approach to try and, even though Jacoby Brissett is going to be the starter to begin the season, we know the future is Drake Maye. So let's try and facilitate at some point his succession into the starting lineup. And then look, Maye wasn't perfect. He made some boneheaded mistakes. And by the end of the season, the sort of narrative was like, he's playing really well outside of the one horrendous play per game that he makes, which doesn't seem to go away. And that, hopefully we can fix that this year, though that is kind of, that was there in college as well. Like, every now and again, there was a mistake. You're like, oh, come on. Like, you can't be doing that. But you have to sort of give him some break because of the situation around him. This year, hopefully the situation will be upgraded enough that we get an idea of how much of that is going to be an inherent part of Drake Maye's game and how much of that is, can we take that away if we upgrade the receivers and the offensive line?
Yeah, I think if you're describing Drake Maye's rookie season beyond the supporting cast too, you would say big plays, that he brought some incredible big time throws to the table. He brought some incredible rushing ability to the table too. He had some games with 46 yards, 95 yards, 59 yards. At one point, he was averaging 9 yards per carry because they never had any QB kneels because they weren't winning, but that helps. But from a scrambling perspective, he was really good as a scrambler. Where he was really bad was sliding because he got concussed twice during the season. So that's one thing that absolutely needs to get better. And I'm not even saying that you're going to use him as part of the design run game a ton, but certainly he has enough athleticism that he could pull it, 15 times a year, once a game, right? Maybe, and steal 10 yards. So I think his running ability was also pretty good last year. And then the big playability, and as you said, the turnover-worthy play percentage was way too high. And some of those were just awful, just some awful decisions. But all things considered, given the situation, I'd be really encouraged. And now if the offense, look, I've said, I don't know if the offensive line is better week one with Will Campbell, maybe Jared Wilson or Garrett Bradbury. I don't know if it's that much better, but it should be on the upward trajectory. The pass catchers should be better. I'm excited to see what Drake Maye does in year 2. And I'll just say, look, nothing against Jayden Daniels. I think he was fantastic. But if Drake Maye or Caleb Williams had the massive year 2 and a big breakout and was comparable to what Jayden Daniels did, or even better than him in a year, right? That could happen. That is possible. I thought all 3 of these quarterbacks showed enough in year 1 that I would still be excited for their future as long as they clean up. Look, Jayden Daniels doesn't have a lot to clean up. Maye does. Caleb Williams does. But we've seen a lot of year 2 jumps in the past from quarterbacks, and whether it's Maye or Caleb Williams, wouldn't be surprised if either one takes a massive jump, or both, this season.
Yeah, I have a lot more confidence in what Chicago has done to upgrade the situation around Caleb Williams than I do for Drake Maye. I think they have upgraded it theoretically, but I think there's a lot more theory than there is with Chicago. The Patriots receiving core could end up being not being very good, being much better. The offensive line could end up being a lot better, but you could also imagine a world where it struggles still pretty hard, whereas Chicago's, I would imagine, should be significantly better. So
you have Josh McDaniels there too, Sam, which is he wasn't a great head coach, certainly, but did a nice job with Mac Jones his rookie season. Certainly a far better offensive coordinator than head coach.
Yeah,
that could help as well.
Yeah, like the optimism should be extremely high for Drake Maye based off what we saw in his rookie season, but I do have more concerns for him than with Williams about whether they've done enough to upgrade the situation around him.
All right, what a fun draft this was. Remember, first 14 picks were all offensive players, 6 quarterbacks in the top 12. So the first receivers off the board, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 4 overall to the Cardinals. Remember at the time, we were hearing, hey, half the league has Malik Nabers over Marvin Harrison Jr. as far as receiver goes. Marvin Harrison Jr. was like the wire-to-wire expected top receiver off the board. That's what ends up happening with Arizona. We could debate whether or not that should have been the case, but I think maybe compared to what Malik Nabers showed and then what Brian Thomas Jr. showed, slight disappointment for Marvin Harrison Jr. as a rookie, but it's also maybe unfair because he did have a nice rookie season. What were your thoughts on Marvin Harrison Jr. as a rookie?
So, yeah, he did. And remember, it was a weird season because it started off and like right at the start of his rookie year, of his rookie season, he had that game where he looked like visibly slow. And then there was the NGS data that said he had like a maximum, miles per hour of like one of the slowest receivers in the NFL. You're like, what happened to Marvin Harrison? Because coming in, he didn't work out, right? He was one of these guys, the sort of new wave of players who's like, everything's on tape. You've got the tracking data. I don't need to go to the combine and run a 40 for you. In fact, I don't need to do it at all. And remember, also, that was something that was NFL driven. He had asked teams, like, do you need me to do any of this stuff? And they're like, no, we're good. You've shown everything already, right? So this was not Marvin Harrison being a diva and being like, I don't need to show you anything. I'm not going to work out. He asked the teams. The team said, no, you're good. We know we've got everything we need. But it did leave that lingering question of like, what is his speed really, right? Is he actually a 4.5 guy? And is that a potential chink in his armor relative to a guy like Malik Nabers, who is blazing fast? Then he rocks up and like right at the start of the season has this weird game where he looked insanely slow. And we're like, whoa, what are we doing here? Then we saw some more impressive stuff from Marvin Harrison over the year, but there was this like consistent inability of him and Kyler Murray to be on the same page, particularly when it came to like back shoulder fade stuff, right?
Yeah.
The stuff that Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams have down pat, is just second nature. They could just not ever get on the same page. Either Harrison was late looking for the ball, or Kyler Murray was throwing it to the wrong place, or it was a combination that never seemed to click.
Yeah, so just a couple of numbers to help describe that, because if you said, look, here's the season for Marvin Harrison Jr., 62 catches for 885 yards, 8 touchdowns. So he's averaging over 14 yards per catch. Now, I know volume stats don't tell the same story that they did 10 years ago, certainly not 20 or 30 years ago.
Right.
But that's not a bad season, but that's fourth among rookie receivers in yards. You have 2 fellow first rounders, Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Nabers, going off, having much better years. So I get that. But he was also targeted over 14 yards per target down the field. That's pretty fun. So it's a vertical pass game. And as you mentioned, how many times every week we're like, do him and Kyler, do they practice together? Why are they not on the same page? And then we started asking questions. Was this the right fit for Marvin, like as far as QB receiver fit? You've got this technically sound receiver and more of an ad-lib type of quarterback in Kyler Murray. Why are they not on the same page? Other number I'll throw out there, in part with that ADOT, 54% completion percentage when targeting Marvin Harrison Jr. So there were passes forced, and when they were on the same page, he wasn't hauling it in. It was just very inconsistent. Almost no yards after the catch from Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, coinciding with what he was doing from a vertical receiver perspective. So look, I think he's good. I think that, but you're a little underwhelmed when you see the dynamism that Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas Jr., or even Ladd McConkey, who also outproduced him, the dynamism that those 3 guys say bring to the table, and what Marvin Harrison Jr. brought to the table just wasn't always there, right? So I think he's still good. He's going to be a solid receiver, but I think it's also fair, even after 1 year, to question how if he can project to even overtake some of those other receivers from his own draft class.
Yeah, and remember the other thing. So in abstract terms, his numbers were fine. Like he had a similar output to his dad, 20 plus years ago. But number one, the game has moved on in terms of passing output since then. The transition period between college and the NFL has become a lot smoother, I think, since then. We are now used to star rookie receivers coming in and immediately being one of the best receivers in the NFL. Now, it's not like it's uniform, but the point is, for a guy like Harrison, he was supposed to be special, right? He was supposed to be, quote unquote, generational. This guy that if anyone was going to have the smooth transition, it should be him. Also, within that draft class, like his selling point was being pro ready. It's like, okay, maybe Malik Nabers is more explosive and more dynamic and the upside is theoretically higher, but Harrison is ready to rock right now. Like that guy looks like an NFL receiver playing at Ohio State. And then for him to be the guy who, now we're like, well, maybe he just needs a bit of time, right? That doesn't quite jive. And if you look at his yards per route run production, like it's 1.6 something. He's down there in a group of receivers that's like Jerry Jeudy, Michael Pittman, Jordan Addison, Noah Brown. These are okay NFL players, but they're not like, wait, where's my superstar, right? That's not the area that he's in. So it's not that he was bad as a rookie. That's definitely overstating what we're talking about here. But underwhelming is definitely the word for Marvin Harrison this rookie season. Yeah. There were flashes. He wasn't bad. There was some good stuff there. There was definitely meat left on the bone in terms of Kyler Murray getting him the football. But overall, you end up coming out of that season being relatively underwhelmed.
Yeah. And I think he's going to be a good player. I wonder if he could be a great player. And I wouldn't be surprised. I also wouldn't be surprised if he's a great player. But yeah, underwhelming, I think, is a fine description for his rookie season, for the number 4 overall pick. And again, you're being compared to, like, Jamar Chase was number 5 overall, hit the ground running. Malik Nabers, number 5 overall or 6 overall, hit the ground running. Like, you're being compared to recent receivers who looked dominant right away, and you didn't necessarily.
And if you look at some of the PFF data, there's definitely a few concerning data points for Marvin Harrison. Like separation percentage was awful. Separation against single coverage, awful. Like it's never 100% the individual player. Like these are some opportunity things, driven things as well. But basically, if you read the scouting report of Marvin Harrison Jr. for someone that didn't love him as a prospect, like there weren't many of those guys. But if you found one of the people that were like anti Marvin Harrison Jr. As a prospect, the player we saw as a rookie matches quite closely with that profile, right? It's like, is he actually that athletic? Can he really separate against man? Like all those things. Yeah. Those are the questions you have now after his rookie season.
There was a Notre Dame game where he struggled against two corners that, went on to play in the NFL, and maybe there was some signal in that. So number 5 overall pick. What a fascinating decision for the Los Angeles Chargers. Had a need at right tackle and certainly a need at receiver after they got rid of Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. So what do? We debated Joe Alt or Malik Nabers forever. Chargers go Joe Alt. That's Jim Harbaugh's the head coach. He's got to go. Offensive line. And of all the first-round offensive tackles, there were a bunch. Joe Alt certainly had the best season, one of the better rookie offensive tackle seasons that we've seen. So I'm not saying the Chargers are justified either way, but I think they were picking between blue chip prospects, and they went with the tackle and Alt, who I thought had a really nice rookie season.
Yeah, Alt was pretty spectacular start to finish, particularly given that he went up against some really good defensive linemen as well. He wasn't just a guy who had a good season but wasn't, tested by the best of the best. He was fantastic. And honestly, like, people at the end of the season, it's like everyone except me gave Jayden Daniels Rookie of the Year. I gave it to Brock Bowers. Joe Alt was in the conversation as well. Like, no one's going to entertain that as a conversation because he's an offensive lineman. But Joe Alt had as good a rookie season as pretty much anyone you're going to find.
Some of the other top rookie seasons for tackles through the years, his teammate Rashawn Slater in 2021, the top grade, Tristan Wirfs, Taylor Decker was on there, Ryan Ramczyk, Jack Conklin. So he's comparable to other guys. So the same way we looked at the quarterbacks and said, hey, there's a drop off in year 2. That's not what usually happens at offensive tackle. Usually if you hit the ground running as a rookie, you're going to continue that pace. I expect Alt to continue to grow and become a consistent top 10 tackle. And the Chargers look like they're going to have 2 top 10 tackles, for the foreseeable future. So I think that was a really nice first year for Joe Alt. We're going to go quicker through some of these non-quarterback discussions. That fair?
Yeah.
Malik Nabers was number 6 to the New York Giants.
Also, this usually happens in these shows, but presumably there are people that barely played, though I can't actually remember any off the top of my head.
Jordan Morgan barely played.
Yeah.
Troy Fautanu barely played. Yeah, so there'll be some players. Dallas Turner.
Because every now and again, when we do this, there's like 5 guys that literally didn't play in their rookie seasons. You're like, we'll catch the time up back there. But actually this year, most of them did see the field some way.
JJ McCarthy didn't play. I mean, so yes, there's plenty of that as well.
Yeah, McCarthy will be a quick one.
Malik Nabers at number 6. Became the clear number 1 for the Giants. Had a couple drops at inopportune times, but I'm certainly not describing his season based off a couple drops. But I think he showed the explosiveness that he showed at LSU, and the Giants. There were times last year where they absolutely fed Nabers, knowing that he was their top guy.
Yeah, a couple of drops and a couple of concussions were the other thing that was a little concerning. I think it was the first one he had was a sort of really bad one where he was trying to do a spectacular sideline catch and didn't break his fall with anything, so basically just face planted straight into the turf with the concrete underneath it. His concussions kind of they lingered a little bit or came back, repeated. That's a little worrying, and hopefully the full offseason just sort of resets him and he's good to go the next season. But yeah, he looked pretty much everything that the Malik Nabers fans thought he would be. He was dynamic, he was explosive. He's got the capability to make spectacular plays. He can win at all areas of the field. Really impressed by him. I thought him and Brian Thomas Jr. were the 2 sort of special wide receivers from that draft class, making Chris Sims look like a genius for his, pre-draft takes. But yeah, Nabers, as advertised, pretty much right out of the box.
He looked exhausted in some of those games, too. That game where he got concussed, I mean, they were feeding him so much. He had 165 targets, Sam, as a rookie. He looked exhausted.
By missing time.
It honestly, it reminded me a little bit of, remember the Randy Ratio season where the Vikings did everything they could to just get the ball into Randy Moss's hands, because Moss had proven to be so special, mostly as a deep threat. They were like, well, we'll just throw more slants and, short passes to him. That's what the Giants did with Nabers. His average depth of target was 9.7. That's one of the lowest of any of the rookie receivers last year. I'm not even sure that's the best usage pattern for Nabers because he averaged 11 yards per catch. And that's like what Michael Pittman Jr. does. And we call him a possession receiver. And he is. But you would never describe Nabers as a possession receiver. But this was just, hey, we got to get the ball into his hands. Big plays will happen if we do it. I'm interested to see how that might evolve. Certainly with Russell Wilson as the starter, I think we're going to see a lot more downfield attempts. So I liked the high volume approach to Nabers. I do wonder how much you want to limit some of the short stuff, even though he can take a slant to the house. How much can you attack down the field a little bit more often with Nabers? But I think he could do it all. Ball skills were off a little bit at times last year, but I think his body control, yak ability, like you described, he's got it all. So continue to feed Nabers. I just don't know if you want to feed him 165 targets and all the short stuff that they did last year.
Yeah. And also, I mean, yeah, he had some unfortunate drops, but if you look at the kind of rate, it's not bad because of those targets. 165 targets does not end up with a particularly bad drop rate, even though he had 8 drops. That's the tricky part for the Giants, is that they didn't massively upgrade that receiving core around him. Bringing back Darius Slayton is a nice move, but you would still love to see at least one more, real weapon to take some of the attention away from Nabers. Like, they fed him because they had to, because they didn't really have anywhere else to go with the football. That's still kind of the case. So that's the one, not even area of concern, but that's the one thing you'd like to see from this Giants offense is, can we get somebody else out there so that we don't need to throw the ball to Malik Nabers 220 times in a season?
All right. Anything else on Nabers at 6 overall?
No, I mean, entirely justified at that spot. And again, the people that had him as wide receiver 1 last offseason, I would make a case for Brian Thomas Jr., but you certainly, with Malik Nabers coming out of that season, you wouldn't be feeling bad about that take if that was what you had.
Yeah, and he also did that with very inconsistent quarterback play too.
Sure.
Brian Thomas Jr., he had some inconsistent quarterback play too, but at least Trevor Lawrence has much more ability to get him the ball, at least before he got hurt. So J.C. Latham was the number 7 overall pick. This was an interesting one because between J.C. Latham, Olu Fashanu, Taliese Fuaga, I don't know if there was a clear OT2, so to speak. Latham goes number 7 overall. He was a right tackle at Alabama. They immediately put him at left tackle. I'm going to say similar things about him and Fuaga. I would say that they both held their own. I mean, for 2 right tackle conversions, I thought they did well for rookies, but certainly some ugly reps in there, some quick losses in the pass game. And I thought Latham, who's just massive, like 340 pounds, that shows up the lack of, so he's really nimble for that size from a pass protection standpoint. I think it showed up a little bit in the run game. He's just late to get in on some blocks. I'm interested to see him moving back to the right side this year with Dan Moore now coming in for the Titans.
Yeah, it was an interesting season. I didn't love Latham as a prospect at all. I was very surprised when he went as high as he did. And so I would have kind of expected him. If you look at the overall broad numbers, it's like, gave up a bunch of sacks, didn't have a great pass blocking performance. And I'm like, okay, I would assume based off that he did pretty well against not good pass rushers and then got exposed against the better pass rushers. But it's actually not the way it broke down. And he had some of his best games against like high-end pass rushers. And had some of his worst games against guys that shouldn't really have been troubling him at all. So it's kind of a weird season. I'm definitely curious to see if he'll be better on the right side. I also wonder if there's some just signal in that immediately Tennessee's going to flip him back to the other side of the ball. Like, I know it's an easy move to make because he played right side. You're then drafting another guy. You're bringing in another guy rather who plays on that side of the ball. It just makes sense. But it also is the kind of move that you're not doing if you love the dude that you drafted a year ago. At the top of the first round, he had an amazing rookie season. Like, if the Chargers had drafted Joe Alt and played him on the left side and he played the way he did last year, they're not moving him to the right side just because they sign another offensive tackle this offseason. You know what I mean? It probably at least signals that they didn't love his rookie season.
Yeah, there's something to that. And like Fuaga might be moving back to the right side too. I haven't actually looked into what they're doing with Kelvin Banks. And we're always advocates for don't worry about moving a guy from right to left or left to right. They're equal positions as far as value. But when you switch a guy, there's a learning curve. And I thought Latham, I mean, I saw him in training camp. He was struggling in camp. Look, I think all things considered, it was a fine rookie season. We've seen far worse. We'll talk about one later. So I would actually, for Latham, Fuaga, Fashanu, all of the first round offensive tackles behind Alt, that next chunk, I would be encouraged for that by them in year 2. So I'm looking forward. I'm expecting a bit of a jump from Latham going back to the right side next year. Pick number 8, a bit of a shock. This was fun, man. This is my favorite part. If we could bottle up the excitement and anticipation of the draft pick and waiting. Who are the Falcons going to pick at 8? Is it Dallas Turner? Is it the first defensive player on the board? Nope. Michael Penix Jr. They go Michael Penix Jr. and we were shocked. Everyone was shocked. But I think a year later, Falcons, somewhat justified here, looks like they've got their QB of the future. And Michael Penix Jr., when he did take over down the stretch, look, he was inconsistent too, but man, he brought some big playability to that offense.
He had some of the most spectacular throws in all of the NFL in like the cameo appearance that he had late in the season. So Josh Allen, generally speaking, is going to be the guy that sort of leads the league in big time throw rate, right? Like Josh Allen is now the guy when it comes to that. Like his profile is sort of superhuman volatility where you're going to get more bad plays than you want from an elite quarterback, but he more than offsets that because he'll basically lead the league in wow plays, at least until Mahomes sort of gets back to his very, very best play. But Josh Allen is that. His big time throw rate last season was 7%, which generally speaking is going to lead the league in any given season. The two quarterbacks who were ahead of that with any kind of significant number of dropbacks were Michael Penix at 9% and Joe Milton based off that one game where he just went ape at the end of the season. But in like 114 dropbacks, Michael Penix had 10 big time throws. He had 7 of them in one game against Carolina. That's off the charts madness.
And his misses it was just like he had open throws that he was just missing. I thought the accuracy was just inconsistent. Look, Zach Robinson's our old friend. He's the offensive coordinator. I may know that, they loved Michael Penix Jr. And I'm not breaking news here. They drafted him at 8 after signing Kirk Cousins to the biggest free agent deal that offseason. So, yes, I mean, as the chat's reiterating, like I was we were a few of the people that weren't trashing this because we're saying, okay, great. This is a great case study. Let's overinvest in quarterback. The Steelers are on year 5 of trying to figure out their quarterback situation. We can't trash, and we're like, what are they going to do? Oh, they're Aaron Rodgers. Ha, ha, ha. This is a terrible move by the Steelers. We can't trash the Steelers for doing this year-by-year thing and trash the Falcons for doubling up at quarterback. We can't do both. I loved this for the Falcons at the time, mostly for the story. I'm not saying it was definitely going to work out, but I loved the story to see how it played out. And I don't even think they expected Penix to be the starter by year 1.
No, that's the thing.
Right? So, they were thinking maybe year 2, certainly by year 3.
Yeah.
But things accelerated because Cousins did not look the same coming off the Achilles.
That's the thing, right? Like part of our reaction, I think, was conditioned by the fact that we knew that they loved Michael Penix like quite a way out relative to certainly everybody else. But the mistake, if you want to call it that, for the Falcons and how they approached the quarterback position last year was not Michael Penix and anything to do with drafting him. It was giving Kirk Cousins the contract they gave him when you didn't really have any idea what condition he was in physically. Like that's the reality of it. They got Kirk Cousins in and then drafted Michael Penix. And the idea was we probably have like a 2-year runway and then it's worth the number 8 overall pick because if we transition in 2 years and Michael Penix is as good as he looks like he is right now, well, we've made a succession plan for the next decade and we do the Packers thing and everyone lauds us as being genius, right? This is the way you're supposed to do things. It's that's how a well-run organization does things. Now, the fact that they had to turn to him before the end of the first season makes it look bad because, well, then why is like you're stuck with Kirk Cousins now. They can't get rid of him because he doesn't want to leave that contract. He's got a no trade clause. You can't just flip him to somebody else for whatever you might be able to get from it. And now you're potentially sitting on a guy who we don't know how he's going to handle being the backup within an organization on that kind of money. Like that's so the mistake was giving Kirk Cousins that contract when you had no idea if coming off his Achilles, he was going to be able to do anything for a year or 2 years or whatever. Drafting Michael Penix at 8 overall when everyone else had him at 30 or whatever, that's fine. That's just the way the NFL is. You say, I think the consensus is wrong on a quarterback. And if we're right, nothing else matters. And that's basically what they did. They grabbed Michael Penix in the top 10, even though most people had him as a consensus fringe first rounder. And based off a very small sample size at the end of the season, he looks like an absolute baller. And they're right.
Yeah. And remember, one of the big knocks on Penix was the knee injuries, multiple ACLs coming out of college. And we'll see if that ends up showing up. But in the 3 games as starter, they scored 34 against the Giants, 24 in the overtime loss to the Commanders. Remember, they went toe-to-toe with the Commanders, and Penix is throwing this game-tying touchdown late in regulation, just aggressive, making big-time throws. And then the Panthers, they scored 38 in a loss in Week 18, where if they had won and the Bucs had lost, they would make the playoffs. So I can't wait to see next year, because I still think the Falcons, with our friend Zach calling the plays, but Bijan Robinson in the backfield, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, whatever Kyle Pitts has, their playmakers with Penix and his downfield aggressiveness, I think they could be really explosive this year.
Imagine that narrative, by the way, before the season, that in Week 18, Bryce Young is going to outduel Michael Penix Jr. in an absolute shootout of insane proportions at the end of the year, with Penix throwing 7 big-time throws and Bryce Young having 3, and numbers off the charts. That would have sounded absolute madness.
And we were watching it all from Circa. What a week that was, Week 18. So I use the term overinvest because they paid Cousins and then used the 8th overall pick and didn't say, hey, we're just going to fix the edge rusher thing. We'll wait till next year to spend 2 first-rounders on the edge rusher. We're going to get the quarterback. So I love that to solve their quarterback situation, they did it in a way that we've literally never seen at that level, to get the top free agent and a top 10 quarterback in the draft, in the same draft, and just saying, we don't want to deal with 3rd-round Desmond Ridder, hope he develops anymore. We're not doing it. We love this guy. I don't care that we paid Cousins. We're doing both.
But this is why, when we always talk about, how you approach the draft, and the smart thing to do is trade down and assemble more draft picks and assume that nobody knows anything, and, accept your fallibility with judging talent. This is why the rules always change when it comes to quarterbacks, right? Like anyone that has a trade model for the draft, it's different when it's do you trade up for a quarterback or a different position, right? It's always a different model based off whether you're talking quarterback or not, because for exactly this reason, right? If you're like Atlanta, should Atlanta assume, if they had drafted a different player that was viewed as a 25 position reach in the draft relative to the consensus board, I would say that's bad. That's bad process, because you're probably not better at everybody else at identifying this. But the payoff, if you're right about the quarterback, is so huge that it's worth the gamble. If they think Michael Penix Jr. is that level of baller, even if nobody else does, if they're right, that changes the franchise for the next 15 years, right? That's why it's worth doing for a quarterback. And okay, it's a crazy small sample size. We don't really know anything about Michael Penix Jr. So, at this point in his career, other than in a few games, he looked like an absolute star. But if he can be that guy going forward, it doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. The fact that they sunk a ton of money into Kirk Cousins doesn't really matter. The fact that they called their shot and everyone else thought they were stupid for it doesn't matter. None of it matters. If you were right about the quarterback, the payoff for that changes everything.
All right, we're at pick 9. We're moving now. Rome Odunze to the Chicago Bears. Remember what we were saying at the time. First off, the number 1 overall pick came from the Carolina Panthers. So the Bears were still benefiting from what looked like the biggest heist in recent NFL history, and still might be, depending on how Caleb Williams develops. But the number 1 overall pick came from the Panthers. Panthers are sitting there with Bryce Young, who looked awful as a rookie. And then the Bears had the 9th overall pick, which was theirs. And it was all right, do they go offensive line? Do they go D-line? No, they're going to Odunze, the guy that a lot of people said would be wide receiver 1 in any other year. And, you might have the same reaction as Marvin Harrison Jr.'s rookie season, a little bit underwhelming, but he's still, 53 catches, 13.6 per catch. What are your thoughts on Odunze in his rookie season?
Yeah, I think it was a little underwhelming. And unlike Harrison, where I think it was underwhelming in a couple of specific areas, I think Odunze's was more broadly underwhelming. It was just sort of everywhere. It wasn't quite as good or impactful as you thought he might be. And I agree. I think Rome Odunze would have been wide receiver 1 in this draft class. He would have been ahead of Tetherall, McMillan, maybe not Travis Hunter, but probably he would be there, either 1 or 1A in this draft class. And it just didn't quite click for him. Now, a huge part of that is going to be the Caleb Williams factor and the fact that Williams was wildly inconsistent across the board. But yeah, I think Odunze made fewer impact plays than I would have expected him to make as a rookie.
Remember, Odunze was Penix Jr.'s favorite target the previous year, and they were, I mean, Penix had some really nice targets there with Jalen McMillan and what Jalen Polk was in college. But Odunze, like their signature was Penix is just going to wind up, throw an absolute laser beam into tight coverage, and Odunze was going to catch it. And maybe there's too much reliance on the contested catch stuff, everything we talked about with George Pickens. But Odunze,
and that's the one thing he was good at as a rookie.
Yeah, and he was still good at those. There were also times where I kept probably when we were doing our prize picks projecting this breakout for Odunze, because there were also times where he was open deep and Williams was missing him. Like the inconsistency of that offense was maddening at times. So I think the lack of production isn't all on Odunze. Everything we talked about with Caleb Williams, his inconsistency, the scheme's inconsistency, I think showed up in Odunze's production as well.
I mean, Jalen McMillan saves this a little bit, but there was a period where you're like, Odunze doesn't look that great. Jalen Polk looks like crap for the Patriots in his rookie season. And Michael Penix looks phenomenal. Maybe actually we had it the wrong way around. It's not Michael Penix being propped up by this trio of Washington receivers. It's this trio of Washington receivers being made look good by Michael Penix being an absolute stone cold baller. And honestly, like I said, McMillan changes that narrative a little bit, but there might be a bit of signal to that. Like maybe Michael Penix Jr. was actually that good, and Odunze was benefiting from a lot of extremely pinpoint passes thrown in there by Michael Penix, and he needs Caleb Williams to step up his level of game to make the same kind of impact.
Couple numbers on Odunze, though. You mentioned the contested catches being good. 13 of 18, so 72% for Odunze, 97th percentile there. Only 62% of his targets were deemed catchable by PFF. That's 9th percentile on the season last year. So again, if I could see a big jump going forward, because I still think Odunze is extremely talented. Ben Johnson's going to have that offense will have far more open throws just designed here. So I think Odunze, I thought it was fine, a solid rookie season, but you would say underwhelming relative to expectations, because we had high expectations for both him and Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah.
All right, pick 10 was J.J. McCarthy. He didn't play. Let's go to pick no. J.J. McCarthy, one preseason game.
Yeah.
A sneaky knee injury that we didn't even notice until after, when it was like, oh, there's a knee. Oh, he's out for the season. What a wild turn of events for J.J. and the Vikings.
Such a wild. So we start off the process, and he's the one quarterback that's supposed to be kind of slow played in. Well, him and Drake Maye, and then obviously Michael Penix was going to be later years in advance, right? But the two quarterbacks we thought would kind of start the season on the bench and then play their way into the lineup, Drake Maye and JJ McCarthy. McCarthy has this preseason game. Now, okay, it's against the Raiders backups or whatever, right? So it's not necessarily, but we went from like, it's going to be Darnold for a while, maybe a month before Darnold plays his way to the bench. And then he looked so good in that preseason game that we came out of that game going, he's going to win the starting job. He's going to be the QB at week one. And then it was like, oh, actually he's picked up a little knee injury, and maybe that's going to set it back. And, then he's going to have to get that knee injury is going to go for a scan. And then, the scan turns out it's going to shut him down for the year. So in the space of like 48 hours, we went from McCarthy's going to win the starting job week one to actually not only is he not going to be starting, but you're not going to see him until next year at all. Darnold's now going to take this the rest of the way. Like the Viking season went from encouraging to written off. And then a few months later, it's like actually Darnold's making a run at MVP. Weird outcome. And now we're back 12 months later to, well, okay, they've elected to go in a different direction. The keys are being tossed to McCarthy. It's a good situation, but we basically have no earthly idea what he's going to look like. But we're dealing on half a preseason game against the Raiders backups and prior draft takes. That's our sum of the Darnold versus McCarthy analysis.
So McCarthy, the outlook for this year, it looks promising, if for nothing else, the supporting cast.
Yeah.
Maybe the best receiving just pass catchers in the NFL with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. So they're good there. The investment on the interior of the offensive line, Will Fries and Ryan Kelly, to go with a really nice tackle duo of Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill, rookie Donovan Jackson at left guard. So an overhauled offensive line. And then the Kevin O'Connell factor. And I'll repeat,
Yes.
I mean, Kevin O'Connell took a 500 quarterback in Cousins, made him way better from a win-loss perspective, we'll say. And same thing with Darnold, guy that won 35% of his games, all of a sudden wins 14 last year. Darnold looks like a completely different player, by the way, with this supporting cast. So the couple examples that came to mind historically of rookie quarterback sits, veteran quarterback has a good year, and then the rookie takes over. There's two that come to mind. I'm sure I'm missing a bunch. Carson Palmer, 2003, drafted, doesn't start. John Kitna starts. Kitna has an outstanding season, one of his best seasons. And the Bengals just say, all right, you're out. It's Carson Palmer's time. And Palmer looked really good in 04 and 05 before getting hurt and kind of, railroading his career just a little bit before he got it back on track. So Palmer stepped into a good situation and produced. And of course, the Mahomes thing, where Alex Smith is the passer rating leader in 2017. Deep ball, has Tyreek Hill, has Travis Kelce, puts up great stats. Mahomes steps into that situation, plus Andy Reid, and of course elevates it to a 50-touchdown season and an MVP. So those two come to mind of veteran quarterback has a good year, rookie comes in and has a lot of success too. So I'm not comparing JJ to Mahomes. I'm just saying this is the type of situation that he's stepping into.
Another one is Dante Culpepper.
Yes.
That for the first year for the Vikings, came in, hit the ground running, looked very good.
That's a good one. So 99, he's drafted. Was it Jeff George and Randall Cunningham that year? Both put up huge numbers.
Definitely Jeff George was a big part of that 99 season.
And they put up huge numbers, and then the Vikings go to Culpepper, and he becomes one of the more productive quarterbacks over the next few years for the Vikings. So there is this previous precedent of quarterbacks doing it and having success. And O'Connell plus pass catchers plus revamped offensive line, really good situation for JJ, who for one game, one half basically in the preseason, looks promising, looks good
against backups. Yeah,
against backups.
It's all basically all deduction and extrapolation. Like we've seen 3 minutes of JJ McCarthy looking good in a preseason game against backup caliber players, but the fact that there are, you can't not read into the fact that Minnesota are tossing in the keys. I mean, they won a ton of games last season, and instead of going with the guy that did that, they're throwing the keys to McCarthy. Number two, Kevin O'Connell's success rate, and number three, the supporting cast around him, which got massively upgraded this year by 3 new interior offensive linemen. So all the tools are there for McCarthy to be good, but now he needs to actually show that he can do it.
And remember, the questions on him were coming from Michigan. He had all these games where he threw the ball 20 to 25 times. It was all run game heavy. He didn't even pass the ball in the second half against Penn State in 2023 because they were running it like crazy. They didn't need him. They didn't need JJ McCarthy to win in some of the big games. They were winning with run defense and defense in the run game. And so can he handle the high volume attack, which O'Connell likes to run?
And then the final point is, this might be utterly meaningless, but he was consensus QB4 in the 6-man draft class last year, all of whom seemed to be good, right? Including the guys that were ranked behind him. Now, maybe he's the one that's not going to be good because of that, but it feels like there should be some substance to the idea that he was clearly within that group, right? Maybe a step below the top 3, but a step ahead of the next 2 guys. And yet all of those guys looked good as rookies. So it would be very unfortunate if Minnesota has found the one guy from that draft class that's actually going to stink.
All right, let's go to pick 11. Olu Fashanu, the left tackle for the New York Jets. We thought Brock Bowers might have been the pick here for the Jets to pair him with Aaron Rodgers. I'm not saying one was right or wrong. I will say that getting a franchise tackle in the first round is probably the better business play here, though having Bowers on that team would have been exciting last year until maybe Rodgers dragged him back down too. But Fashanu, this is one of those where the data doesn't always tell the story. He was plugged in at right tackle when Morgan Moses got hurt, struggled at right tackle. The story for Fashanu is looked like a classic left tackle, had only played left tackle at Penn State, looked like the future at left tackle once Tyron Smith was out of there, which he is. He's retired now. Fashanu, when he took over at left tackle, week 12 or so, looked really, really good, especially for a rookie. When he played right tackle, he struggled. I think the future is very bright for Fashanu at left tackle.
Yeah, I loved Fashanu as a tackle prospect. Like I definitely thought he was way better than JC Latham. I don't know if the left tackle, right tackle thing is just he was a college left tackle who was struggling when he was thrown to the other side of the line. As soon as you put him back in his comfort zone, he looked much better. Or if he is going to be one of those players that is simply very one-sided. They brought him in effectively as Tyron Smith insurance, but also as a kind of he can be our swing tackle. Like, I mean, that's basically the reality of being the third tackle in the NFL, right? You're going to have to play both sides of the line if you're needed to put into the lineup. But he might be a one-sided player where he just is the left tackle of the future or the present now. But based off his play at left tackle, I would be very excited for what he can do going forward. He gave up 1 sack, I think, and it was on the left side, but his pass blocking grades at PFF were excellent. His pressure rate in terms of what he allowed was a lot better as well. He looked really good on the left side.
Yeah, it's one of those where, again, I think the interpretation of the data is crucial. He had a 61 overall PFF grade that was comparable to JC Latham, to Brandon Coleman. Like, it was okay. But just on the left side, it was over 70. On the right side, it was in the 40s. So that's where it's like, all right, our preconceived notions that he is just a pure left tackle, I don't want to mess with him because I think he could become one of the better pass protectors in the NFL. Nothing about his left tackle play last year, dissuades me from that. So encouraged by what he's going to do going forward, like I said, with a lot of these other tackles in this class. All right, now pick 12, sixth quarterback off the boards, Bo Nix, going to the Denver Broncos. Let's be honest about what this felt like at the time. First off, the Raiders are sitting there at pick 13 with just as much of a quarterback need as the Broncos. The Broncos felt like we were questioning, is this just, hey, we're stuck, we don't want to wait, Raiders might take him, he's the next quarterback on the board, it's Bo Nix. At the time, Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. were projected as maybe second round type of players, late first if a team is desperate or whatever, but Bo Nix goes at 12 and has a really nice rookie season, and Denver now looks like a franchise on the rise, whereas last year at this time didn't have a ton of talent. We're coming off a bad year, and they got the sixth quarterback out of 6, and it felt like an afterthought. But Denver, I think, thrilled with what Bo Nix did as a rookie.
Yeah, so it's weird because like he was generally seen as a consensus, fringe first rounder, early second round type of player. On the other hand, he did pop up a lot in first round mock drafts to Denver at pick number 12 because Denver needed a quarterback and he might be the next one available at the point they were drafting. And it was a good stylistic fit of Bo Nix going to a Sean Payton offense. Like it did. So most people, when they were doing mock drafts a year ago, would have had both Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. available when Denver were picking, but Bo Nix was the more stylistic fit mesh with Sean Payton. So it was interesting when they did make that pick eventually. On the one hand, you can look at it and say, well, if you buy everything they're selling, they being Denver and Sean Payton, they looked in his backpack. There was nothing but football stuff in there. He's our guy, right? If you're buying everything they're selling, you're like, well, they identified their guy months out. He was the dude the whole way. They're ecstatic with this pick. Or you can say they are a classic example of simply needing a quarterback and having to grab the next guy. And that's why they all go in the first round. And if the guy doesn't go in the first round, he's not seen as a starter because teams that need starters have to take them as soon as they have the shot. So it was difficult to figure out where in that narrative Denver actually fit. And then early in the season, like he starts the season and he looked like crap for the first couple of games. He had like 4 interceptions, no touchdowns, no production. It was all looking rough. We're like, wow, maybe they shoehorned this pick and they're going to regret that. But then the journey he went on over the season, where like early in the year, there's not a lot of production. Really, the best thing he's bringing to the table is his athleticism and scrambling and making plays with his legs and, leading the team in rushing over and over again. But late in the year, he was cooking. And suddenly you're like, wow, maybe Bo Nix was actually legit. And the ceiling for him is, higher than anybody saw coming. And suddenly he looks like a baller. And I mean, again, another guy where I think you have to be really excited by what he can be in a situation that wasn't great. Like the receivers outside of Cortland Sutton weren't particularly good. There was a lot wrong with that environment. And yet he looked really good as the season progressed and, was on an upward arrow over the course of the year.
Yeah, and it's such a winding career too, because we talked about Bo Nix as a prospect, where I described him as going from a Jay Cutler style to an Alex Smith style over the course of his Auburn career to his Oregon career. He went from, freelancing, gunslinger type to, oh, this dude doesn't turn the ball over. Turnover worthy play percentage is super low. Average depth of target is really low. I think you're right. The arrow's pointed up. I'm gonna explain both sides of it really quickly though. I think the deep ball was fantastic down the stretch. Remember a couple of those passes he made against the Bengals on the Saturday game, the Marvin Mims touchdown. His ability to get the ball down the field was fantastic. His intermediate passing grade, this is where, like, when he started out slow, the intermediate passing, the timing and accuracy was all over the place. Still ended up with a 54 grade on 10 to 19-yard throws. That is when most quarterbacks, that's where they make their money, really. 10 to 19 yards, right? Your seam routes, your out cuts, your digs. He wasn't doing that. 54 PFF grade is awful at that level. 0 big time throws, 10 turnover worthy. That's still a concern going forward for Nix. But then on the other side, what you mentioned about his running ability and his ability to pick up first downs and to do all of this without a running game. The other thing I was encouraged by was Sean Payton. We kept describing him as starting to feel it a little bit in the second half. I thought his comfort level with Nix running the offense really took off in the second half, to the point where they were moving players around, creating mismatches. I thought Payton looked like a good play caller for the first time since his Saints days, where he wasn't doing that with Russell Wilson and maybe first half of the year Bo Nix. So I think there's a lot to be encouraged by with Nix. I think there's still a little buyer beware going forward on him. The intermediate passing is one. The other part is, like, I know people are like, oh, the stats, he had this many. I don't even know what his touchdown interception ratio was. He was inflated a little bit with a nice 4-touchdown game at the end of the year against Kansas City's backups playing for nothing. So the overall stat line is going to be a little inflated for the rookie. Hear me, Perna. I'm not trashing your guy, Bo Nix. I'm just telling you, don't throw Bo Nix's stats out there. He had a game against backups the same way J.J. McCarthy did in the preseason, the same way Joe Milton did against the Bills. All right. I'm just saying the stat line's not telling the whole story, but the upward trajectory of Bo Nix's game in the second half of the season, and kind of holding his own against the Bills, even though the Bills ended up running away with it. They hung tough in there, and I thought Nix did a nice job in the one playoff game.
Nix is the thing that he brought to the table, though. I sort of broadly bucketed it as the athleticism and scrambling earlier, in particular when he was under pressure. Like we talked earlier about Caleb Williams, the only guy worse in the NFL in terms of pressure to sack rate for Caleb Williams was Will Levis. Levis was at 30%. Caleb Williams was at 28. Bo Nix was at 13, right? 13 is a almost league leading level of, like, impressive play under pressure. When he was pressured, he had an incredible ability to scramble for positive yardage. He averaged 9.4 yards per attempt scrambling, which is 2 yards more than Jayden Daniels, right? So, like, Jayden Daniels are coming out of it being like, this dude is one of the best scrambling quarterbacks in the NFL, one of the best rushing threats in the league, period. Bo Nix averaged 2 more yards per scramble when he took off from pressure, right? Yes. So not, when he just sees it, right? Where the gap opens up, the A gaps part, everyone's rushing to the edge, and suddenly the C's part in front of him, you're like, I'm just going to take these free yards. When, in particular, when he is forced out of the pocket because of pressure, Bo Nix was finding 10 rushing yards every time, effectively. That's insane. Like, that's incredibly impressive from him.
And I thought a big coming out party for him was at Kansas City, week 10. Remember, they should have beaten the Chiefs if they didn't have a field goal blocked. And that was Bo Nix when Spags was in his bag the whole first half of the season, especially on third down, especially on gotta-have-it plays. And Bo Nix was making big-time plays, converting first downs, getting the Broncos into game-winning field goal range. Again, a lot to be encouraged by Nix. And I will say, I did predict, hey, if someone's going to have success early, it's Bo Nix. It didn't go in the exact pattern that I was thinking. But at the end of the season, it's like, yeah, the most experienced college quarterback of all time, till Dylan Gabriel, had success as a rookie. While, some of the other quarterbacks like Caleb Williams or Drake Maye were 3-and-out type of players, shouldn't be terribly shocking. And as the pendulum maybe swings back to experience for a lot of quarterbacks. So really impressive rookie season by Bo Nix. And I think the Broncos feeling pretty good about their situation going forward.
Yep.
All right, we will go faster through the non-QBs. Brock Bowers at 13, another offensive player. It felt like the Raiders were left out of the musical chairs, 6 quarterbacks in the top 12. I can't imagine they were expecting that, especially with Penix coming off the board. But Brock Bowers, a nice consolation prize for the new regime here for the Raiders.
Yeah, and that's an interesting, counterfactual. What would have happened if both those quarterbacks, like QBs 5 and 6, were still on the board when the Raiders were picking? Would they have grabbed one of those guys? Did they love one of those QBs? In the end, they get Brock Bowers. And look, Brock Bowers looks like a superstar.
We might be able to get Raiders GM at the time, Tom Telesco, on the show.
Ooh, can I ask him?
We're in talks. We'll see if we can get that out of him. If Bowers, Penix, and Nix are on the board, who are you taking?
Damn right. Yeah, it's a good question to answer. They end up getting Bowers. He looks like an absolute star. I gave him Rookie of the Year over Jayden Daniels as one of the 50 AP voters. People were quite upset by that. But look, my logic is Bowers had an all-time great season for a position where that doesn't happen very often as rookies. Like, he broke Mike Ditka's record, which has stood since 1961, I think. Like, this is not a position where these guys come in and cook from day one. And you can say, okay, but he's more of a receiver than he is a tight end. I mean, that's not a new thing, right? Like, Dustin Keller, these tight ends that are really receivers have been coming into the league for 20 years, and nobody's done what he did as a rookie. So, and he did it without a good quarterback situation. It's not like he stepped into a scenario where Tom Brady's throwing him the football. He had a bad quarterback situation, and he was still uncoverable, even when he was the primary target within that offense from very early on. Brock Bowers looks like a matchup nightmare. And, the heir to guys like Travis Kelce as an unusual tight end, not a prototype, but an absolute dominant force in the passing game.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of data against first-round tight ends, and they don't always pan out, or they pan out in year 5 when the rookie contract is over. And I counter that with, I agree with that general assessment. Now, look, I thought Kyle Pitts and Brock Bowers were both unique tight end prospects. Pitts, by the way, Pitts, without the high expectations, has been solid, right? But just hasn't reached what people expected. I think Bowers certainly already reached it and will continue to reach it. Mismatch nightmare. An elite tight end, I think, is well worth the value in the first round, or just financially down the road, especially if you're providing receiver talent at tight end prices. So I think Geno Smith, the Raiders, Pete Carroll, John Spytek, they're all benefiting from this selection, which, look, it didn't feel great at the time for a team that certainly needed a future quarterback, and they got a tight end. But Brock Bowers had such a good rookie season. I expect him to continue it and to be a mismatch weapon going forward here.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about what is your time scale? Like, if you're looking last year, not getting a quarterback and getting Brock Bowers did them no good whatsoever. They won 4 games, right? But if you're looking now, well, now we found Geno Smith and he's got Brock Bowers to throw to. Now everything feels great, right? So it's all about what kind of time scale you're looking at.
Yeah. I mean, I made the point at the time too, Sam. I was like, look, it doesn't feel great for the Raiders right now, but a year from now, someone's going to have a great weapon for the new quarterback. And here we are. It's Geno. I was telling the future. Geno Smith has this weapon that was left him in Brock Bowers. So I thought he had a great rookie season and will continue. Pick 14 was Taliese Fuaga, the tackle out of Oregon State. Like I talked about him a little bit earlier, right tackle at Oregon State. He moved to the left side with the Saints. I thought for rookies, it wasn't a disaster in pass protection for him, for Latham. Held up pretty well. We'll see if he ends up moving back to the right side. He was one of the better rookie run blockers as far as tackles go. That was what he was known for at Oregon State, moving people, incredible strength. So I thought for him and Latham, both guys who have old school right tackle bodies, who were never perceived as left tackles, 15 years ago, both held their own at left tackle and showed, he's got the athleticism to hold up, just switching sides, just moving positions. I thought it was a nice rookie season for Fuaga, who, definitely had some blips in pass protection like any rookie will.
Yeah, and he's the guy where I think there was an actual pattern to how he performed pass protection wise. Like we talked about, there not really being that for JC Latham, but Fuaga in particular, I thought against not good pass rushers, he was very good. Against, in particular, small, quick pass rushers, those were the guys that gave him trouble, right? Like when he struggled, it was against those guys that you would expect to give sort of big-bodied, former college right tackle some issues playing left tackle. So I would be pretty encouraged by him after his rookie season. I don't think that that's a permanent problem necessarily, a permanent flaw, that quicker and more nimble pass rushers are going to give him issues, but they're definitely the guys that you would expect to give him trouble initially early in his NFL career. It is going to be interesting to see what they do with him in terms of, do we keep him on the left side? Do we move him back to his college position now that we drafted a new tackle in the draft? He certainly didn't play badly enough at left tackle that I'm like, I want to move him back to the right side ASAP. So I think they can legitimately go in either direction there.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what they do there, but some flexibility showed. I mean, I would expect him to be better at his natural right tackle spot, but he showed he could hold up at left tackle. And when I'm looking at rookie tackles, if they hit a certain baseline, I feel good about them improving. Some of the other tackles didn't hit that yet, so I feel less good about the guys we're going to talk about later. But I feel good about Fuaga moving forward. The first defensive player comes off the board here. At pick 15, Laiatu Latu from UCLA. By the way, I remember at the time, Dallas Turner was the favorite to be the first defensive player off the board. You and I were certainly in favor of Latu as edge one, even though Verse ended up being edge one. But Latu going at 15, we liked this pick at the time. I would probably put him into the Marvin Harrison Jr. bucket, where it was a good season, but a little underwhelming maybe compared to our expectations. Latu did his best work, ironically, against Latham, Fashanu. He had his best games against his fellow rookies last year. He was just inconsistent as far as his production throughout the year.
Yeah, I was definitely underwhelmed. There were occasional games where he looked really good, but I thought that his baseline would be a lot higher than it was. Like, because he was such a sound technician, because he had so many ways to win, such a deep tool bag of pass rushing moves, I would have expected significantly more pressure than he got. He rushed the passer 375 times over the course of the season and had 38 total pressures. That's not a good rate. It really isn't for a guy that has his tool set. And like, the thing that maybe sort of super confident about it was, I mean, obviously he had the college production and the PFF grades and all those things as well. But when he tested, he was a good athlete. Like, he wasn't, I thought we were talking about a guy at the start of that process who was exceptionally well-rounded and like a great technician, but was going to be a marginal athlete. And I was still willing to go to bat for him then, but he actually then ended up being a pretty good athlete as well. So yeah, I wouldn't be discouraged about what he can be going forward, because those things are all still there, but I definitely expected some more production from him in his rookie year.
We do see big jumps for edge rushers in year 1 to 2. Again, it was fine. He had 4 sacks, a couple of them against, one was against Fashanu, I believe. Had some other quick wins against Latham. A lot of his quick wins didn't show up in the box score when I was going back and looking through. Like, there were a lot of quick passes. So I think you saw flashes. There were just a lot of games with 1 pressure, 2 pressure. It was inconsistent. He was also part of a rotation. He didn't play more than 46 snaps in any games. There was a lot of 35 to 45 snaps per game. They've got some depth there on the defensive line. Given my priors, I would expect a jump here in year 2. A 71.5 overall PFF grades, not bad. I mean, it's a solid rookie season, but I was expecting, hey, I could see him being in the 80s, right? I could see him starting a little bit better than he did. So also wouldn't be surprised if he took another step forward here in year 2.
Yeah, agreed. Like, I wouldn't be writing him off. I wouldn't be thinking that the disappointment will continue into year 2. I would expect some kind of jump, but I'm definitely a little bit disappointed by the season that he did have as a rookie.
Pick 16, Seattle Seahawks go Byron Murphy II, defensive tackle out of Texas. Late in the process, there were rumors about him maybe going in the top 10 and being close to the top defensive player off the board. He ends up being the second defensive player. Seahawks did not go with their interior offensive line need last year. They did this year, but Murphy added him to the defensive line room. I thought he showed some really good flashes in the preseason, was inconsistent too during the season. He didn't rush the passer as consistent as I thought, or as well as I thought he would. I went back and looked through some of his run defense stuff. I thought he did. Remember, he played out of position a little bit at Texas, playing nose tackle, while T'Vondre Sweat with a nose tackle body was on the same team. I thought Murphy did a really nice job holding the point at Texas, not so much at the NFL level. It's a little harder to do. So he got moved off the ball a little bit, but you still see when he gets it right, hand position, striking and everything, he is tough to block. So he was a little up and down, I think, as a rookie.
Yeah, flashes were what we saw from Byron Murphy. I think whether it's run defense or pass rushing, there's a few snaps over the course of the season where he looked like an absolute dominant force and a potential superstar. There just weren't that many of them. And I think you're right. He had a weird. He's an interesting player because I'm not sure we know what he is yet. Like he's prototypical 3 technique size, right? That pass rushing, defensive tackle that plays over or outside the guard. 6'1", 308 pounds. It's like right where you want those guys to be. But really at Texas, he was a nose tackle, while the nose tackle looking guy actually played a lot of his time in the 3 technique type of spot. Now, Seattle's deployment for him year 1 sort of very firmly reversed that. And they made, well, he's 3 technique prototype size. He's going to be a 3 technique for us. I don't know that he plays that way though, consistently. And he certainly didn't generate that kind of pressure, but he also didn't, consistently dominate the run the way you were talking about either. So I think it's a little bit up in the air. I think part of another guy that kind of goes in the underwhelming bucket, right? And maybe it was a reason that these defensive players slipped in the first half of the draft last year. But I think maybe part of that sort of relative struggle year 1 is that it is kind of changing roles and responsibilities for him. Like we tend to assume that just because he's like prototypical 3 tech size and has got some plays in college where he does really well rushing the passer, that's just who he is. But it isn't. Like it's not what he's been doing. So it's probably going to take him some time to, flip that kind of responsibility in his mind to become a slightly different stylistic player. And maybe that's just what we're witnessing.
Just to add some numbers to it, 12th percentile pass rush grade relative to NFL starters last year, a little bit below average in pass rush win rate, a little bit below average in run defense grade, above average in run stop percentage last year. So look, I think there's still something there with Murphy. Again, my priors, I'm not going to come back to my priors. If I liked the guy, I'll say he underwhelmed a little bit. He'll figure it out. If I didn't like the guy, I'll say, well, I knew it, of course. But yeah, we'll see what happens with Murphy. They're kind of loaded on the defensive line as far as talent goes too. So I think there's opportunities for him to progress. The draft got really interesting here at pick 17. The Jaguars were on the clock and the Vikings came back up and traded up for Dallas Turner. So remember, Minnesota was rumored to have been locked in on JJ McCarthy or another quarterback behind the scenes, and that they were rumored to maybe go up to number 4 to make it 4 quarterbacks off the board. The Vikings did not use that extra ammo to go get the quarterback. They waited. They got JJ McCarthy at 10, and instead, or maybe did they trade up 1 spot to go get? Yeah, they traded up 1 spot from 11 to 10. But then they still had a lot of extra ammo. Maybe they were expected to use. They go up and get Dallas Turner, the edge rusher out of Alabama, at pick 17. They had just spent in the offseason Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard both come in free agency. So Turner is edge 3 and didn't play a ton of snaps as a rookie.
Yeah. Underwhelming, but for a different reason. Some of these other guys played a lot of snaps and didn't do much with them. The underwhelming element of Turner is that it took him like half the season to really be any kind of factor whatsoever. Played quite a lot in week 1. And then once the Viking starters were healthy and available, his playing time was it was a situational player and barely even that. He was playing, single digit snaps, like 15 snaps, 10 to 20 level snaps. And then late in the season, we started to scale it up a bit, and we saw 20s and 1 game with 34 snaps, but really wasn't a big factor. And when he was on the field, did not do anything really as a pass rusher. Again, that's kind of disappointing. I think Dallas Turner was a lot more not limited, not one-dimensional, but was a lot sort of had a lot fewer strings to his bow than I think people were giving him credit for maybe at draft time. So it wasn't necessarily a shock to me that he was, had some work to do. But the thing that he was good at, and he was good at, I'm surprised that the one trick, right? The one trick thing was not functioning at the NFL level. Like he just wasn't a factor really as a rookie.
I could absolutely see Turner developing and taking his next step forward as well, as the chat agrees. My thing with him was, if you look at the 4 first-round edge rushers, Latu, who we just discussed, Jared Verse coming up in a minute here, Chop Robinson, Turner's career pass rush production was below those guys. And Turner was talked about as the top pass rusher, the top edge rusher in this group because of his athleticism. So again, just going back to this, if the athleticism is the thing that's putting you over the top, versus production, I would revert the other way. So I could still see him developing. I'm interested to see too how much, like with the depth that they have, how much they lean into it. His career high or his season high in snaps was week 1, 35, because they blew out the Giants. Didn't reach that again, as you mentioned, uneven, even usage pattern. Want to see if they end up using him as a move around type of guy, because he's, got some athleticism and some length that is difficult to deal with for opposing offensive linemen. So could see a big year too, if given the opportunity. But if Grenard and Van Ginkel stay healthy, we're looking at probably maybe a 350, 400 snap season at most for Dallas Turner.
I mean, he needs a big step up to force his way into rotation, like into snaps, right? I mean, they've shown last season that they've got 2 very good players occupying those roles. I'm sure they would like to spell them, but they're not going to give him snaps unless he's earning them. Like if he has a season like he did last year, where he's basically a non-factor when he's out there, they're not going to up his workload relative to Van Ginkel and Grenard. He's going to need to show that he's not there isn't a drop off in production when he comes into the lineup.
All right, pick 18. The Cincinnati Bengals went Amarius Mims, the tackle out of Georgia. Remember, he had under 900 career snaps at Georgia. So the question was, 340 pounds, moves well, 6'7", just no experience. And we know offensive linemen often take 2,000 to 3,000 snaps, maybe more, to figure it out. And I thought there was definitely some inconsistency to Mims' game. PFF grades from a game perspective ranged from 41 to 72. So you saw that, like, there was never a few elite games in there, some bad games in there, just a lot of inconsistency to Mims' game as a rookie. And he battled injuries as well early on.
Yeah, dealt with injuries early. That's obviously going to be an issue. Relatively rough first half of the season, or first half of his season, given he was delayed getting into it. I thought the first half he was not really a problem, but was definitely not a particularly plus player for them. Second half of the season, I thought he started to put it together. You saw the movement skills, like had a really rough game right at the end going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers edge rushers, but that's to be expected. Overall, I would be pretty excited about what he can be. Like, he was always going to be, raw, always going to be a developmental, if you like, offensive lineman. And that's a pretty high spot to grab a developmental offensive lineman. But, he's a freak show in terms of physicality, like the size of him. It's all like he's 340 pounds and it's all muscle. He's not fat. He's jacked at 340 pounds. And you saw those movement skills, late in the year. You saw him starting to put it together. Obviously, there's always going to be a limit to that when you run up against elite edge rushers. So he does need to take a step, but I think he's capable of it.
Yeah. Remember at this time too, I remember Daniel Jeremiah, when he was trying to sort through his top players, he was debating between Mims and Tyler Guyton, who went later as inexperienced first-round picks. I liked Mims above Guyton. I know the Bengals obviously did. Guyton went later to the Cowboys. Some similarities to them as prospects. Guyton's production a little bit below what Mims had in college, and I think we saw some of that as rookies. So yeah, I think he's not. I don't feel as confident as I feel about, say, Fuaga, Latham, and some of the tackles who went higher. But if Mims takes another year or two to become a solid right tackle, I would not be surprised. I think he's at least on that projectable trajectory for offensive tackles. How's that?
And a big part of his thing is injuries. I mean, he had injury issues in college. He was injured to start the season in the NFL. Like, he needs to stay healthy. I mean, that's first and foremost. That might be the single biggest question mark that Mims is dealing with is, can the dude stay healthy for 17 games?
Yes, absolutely. Pick 19, Jared Verse, Los Angeles Rams, the first Rams first rounder in like 8 years, and it's Jared Verse, and they hit. Clearly the top edge rusher, outstanding season, the heart and soul of that Rams defense. I think you saw it early on when their defense wasn't good. Every week it's like, well, Jared Verse is just blowing up blocks in the run game, and his power is an absolute issue for offensive tackles. You're feeling that. And then little after halfway in the season, before you know it, the Rams are like looking good defensively, and it's Verse combined with some of the other young defensive linemen, just the heart and soul of that defense that really turned things around in the second half.
Dude, Verse was an absolute beast. Based off that evidence, the Rams should probably keep first-round picks more often.
Yes.
It's insane. Like, he might already have the NFL's best bull rush and might have had it since the since like week one, since he stepped on the field. His bull rush is nuts. There's obviously that highlight reel play where he absolutely buries Jordan Mailata, who's like, 345 pounds or whatever he is. Absolute monster. Now, there's always some caveats to that, right? He had basically a running start at him, but still, he put Mailata airborne. Like, he took him off the ground. Wow. I couldn't do that if I had a 50-yard head start and launch myself at him. Like, to be able to take a guy as strong as Mailata, even if you've got you've got a little bit of a running start working your way down the line, and take him off the ground is insane power. And his bull rush was just consistently destroying people. And then he was able to work off that, because now you're so terrified of his power, you're going to give him a soft edge. You're going to give him a weak inside shoulder. And he was just able to exploit that over and over again. The dude racked up 89 pressures, including the playoffs, where he had 12 in those 2 games. He was good against the run. I mean, man, Verse already one of the better edge defenders in all of football in terms of well-rounded pass rush and run defense based off his power. Like, he's immediately one of the best power rushers in the NFL, and who knows where the ceiling lies now.
One of my favorite things about college football is week one, there are some players every year that come out of nowhere and in 1 week look like first rounders or future first rounders that just completely off the radar. And that was Verse back in 2022. He had just transferred from Albany. They were playing LSU. I think he did it against a freshman, Will Campbell, actually. And you were just like, this dude, tough to block. This guy's a future first rounder. And then he only played 400 snaps that year and kind of tapered off. And he only played limited snaps in 2023, but we still liked him as a first round player. Last year, plays over 900 snaps, by far his career high, never slows down. There was points in his college career where I thought the power was jarring early on, and then tackles kind of got used to it. Like, the NFL never got used to his power, which was impressive to me, right? Because a lot of times it's like, you see this thing in college, oh, that won't play in the NFL. You can't just bully people in the NFL. Well, he's an absolute bully on the edge, and all the way through the playoffs, he was able to show that. I
mean, I don't think he was more effective in the NFL than he was in college. Like, I don't think he was that effective in college. He was even more dominant with his power than he was at the college level. Maybe not at Albany, but certainly at Florida State his final year. I thought he was more impressive as a rookie. It was insane how effective that power was against NFL players.
The one last thing I want to add, I talked to a former NFL executive who was, when they were breaking down the draft here.
Name drops. Not even name dropping. That's the anonymous source dropping.
Anonymous source. But he was like, when I talk about overrating, scheme fit, it's based off a lot of these conversations, because his statement was like, well, Verse would be great for the Ravens, the power player that the Ravens like. And I'm just like, well, Jared Verse apparently fits with everyone. Fits with the Rams, fits with the Eagles, fits with the Cardinals, fits with the Patriots, fits with the Browns. He fits with everyone. So let's not overrate scheme fit. Even though you'd love to picture him in a Raven scheme that loves the nice power edge, like, Verse fits with everyone. Let's not overrate the scheme fit. He was outstanding as a rookie and defensive rookie of the year by a wide margin. I don't know what the final was, but I mean, I don't think there was much competition. Maybe Quinyon Mitchell up there and Cooper Jean as the next two. But yeah, clearly Verse as the defensive rookie of the year. Pick number 20 was Troy Fautanu from the Steelers. Played right tackle for 2 weeks, then got hurt. Thought he held his own early on. Run game and pass game was fine. They kept him at right tackle with Dan Moore at left tackle. I don't know if Fautanu is going to become the left tackle going forward here with Broderick Jones staying at right tackle, but they've got some decisions to make there as far as which former first rounder plays left and right here going forward.
And I think he only played one game as well, because I think he was hurt coming into the season as well. So basically no sample size of Fautanu. Played one game, was solid in that one game, the end. Yeah, I think like Fuaga, we have the question of which side of the line is he going to play. College, he played both sides in college, right? Certainly played left side to finish his year or finish his career. Moves to the right side for the Steelers last year. It was fine there. I think you can construct an argument that he could play either one of them, whichever one you want to play him at. Either way, this year is going to be when we get to find out anything about Fautanu.
See, we can go fast here. Chop Robinson, the next pick at pick 21. This is the first one that felt just unexpected, not the first one, but this was an unexpected pick. I think a lot of people had Chop going late first and into the second round. Dolphins, they were coming off a year where all of their edge rushers got hurt. They were pulling the 2011 and 2012 draft class off the street to go rush the passer in Kansas City in 30 below weather. And they said, never again. We're going to make sure we have enough juice off the edge. And Chop Robinson had a really nice rookie season.
Yeah, I never understood why there was this giant gap between those top three guys versus Latu and Dallas Turner and Chop Robinson. I always felt like his production, even if he was more one-dimensional in terms of being a pass rush specialist who wasn't going to be as good against the run, I felt like his production as a pass rusher was so good that it brought him into that conversation where we don't know how good the other guys are going to be. Now, obviously, if you're sort of redrafting now, it's a totally different order across the board. But Robinson showed that explosiveness, that juice as a pass rusher was effective day one. Different type of effective to Jared Verse and not as effective. But the dude racked up over 50 pressures, with that speed, with that explosiveness, with that burst. And I don't care that he wasn't amazing against the run right away. And who knows how good he can be going forward. But don't overlook a dude that can get that kind of production as a pass rusher.
So I compared him to Carl Lawson coming out as far as a little bit of body type, the juice off the edge, and the fact that Lawson was never really a good run defender. And I know that if you look at PFF grades, the Chop Robinson run defense grade isn't great, but I went back and looked at why. He was actually way more impressive to me taking on blocks, using his leverage. He's got this lower center of gravity, doesn't have the long arms, but he was popping, pullers and tackles. Like, he was doing a good job, just didn't finish plays. He had a horrible missed tackle rate, and that was a huge part of it. Low run stop percentage. So he was actually more of a disruptor than a finisher in the run game, which I actually think is encouraging. The fact that he held up pretty well as a, quote, undersized type of edge rusher. So I was really impressed with Chop Robinson's season. And like I said, his pass rush production, Latu's pass rush production, and Versus were all better than Dallas Turner, who was longer and more projectable. And through 1 year, all of those guys produced more than Turner in his limited skill set. I'm just saying the production won out to me in year one when projecting these edge rushers. So Chop Robinson, I thought, was a nice pick for the Dolphins there at 21.
The other guy that he is a little bit reminiscent of is the guy's name just dropped out of my head the second I was about to talk about Cameron Wake, right? That sort of low to the ground, incredible athlete, twitchy, explosive, and obviously a former Dolphin as well. Cameron Wake was one of the best pass rushers of his generation. I'm not saying that he's going to get there, but year one from Chop Robinson, I thought was really impressive, and I'm excited to see what he can do going forward.
All right, pick 22, Quinyon Mitchell, the first corner off the board. We've seen corners drop a little bit the last couple of years, but man, if you knew you were getting a Quinyon Mitchell coming out of Toledo, remember he had a crazy productive season, never transferred to the big school, so you had the question about the small school thing, went to the Senior Bowl. They played a lot of off coverage at Toledo, shows up at the Senior Bowl, has a couple sweet press reps, and then he just, stands on the side with his pads and helmet and says, I'm done. I've showed what I need to show. And he had an awesome rookie season for the Eagles playing on the outside.
He did. That would be a fascinating redraft. If we were doing last year's draft over again, what would you do with hindsight? Like, how much higher would Quinyon Mitchell go if teams knew what he was going to be right out of the box? He looked pretty spectacular. I think sometimes the narratives were a little bit overblown. Like, man, look what he did to Terry McLaurin, who got 0 catches, 5 yards against him, yada, yada. That was a little bit over the top, but I thought he was really, really good. And again, I thought he got better as the year wore on. Like, he was already good right at the start of the season, but late in the year, he was genuinely impressive and dominant at corner for Philadelphia. And they were leaving him on an island doing what he was able to do. He's so good at that off coverage because of that experience at Toledo. But he can play everything. Like, he can play aggressive press coverage. He can play off. He can play in zones, play in man. Really impressed by what he did. And a great answer for, we've talked to guys recently, the draft stuff, who were like, players are going to be getting these questions now. Why didn't you transfer to a bigger school? Well, like, maybe they won't like the answer, but Quinyon Mitchell shows that it might not matter. Like, you can stay at Toledo for your entire career, and it doesn't signal you're like hiding from the big game or you can't do it. Just a great draft pick. And if there was one other guy in the running, I think for defensive rookie of the year, it was Mitchell.
Yeah, and I think it was Mitchell and Cooper DeJean that finished second and third, right? So the Eagles' first two picks, both cornerbacks. First time they had drafted a corner since 2001 or 2002, right? Was it the Lito Shepherd year?
But Howie's just ticking off these things that people say he never does in the first round. Like every
love
year,
it.
he's going to do the next one.
He's just the worst mock ever, Howie. I really thought the Eagles benefited. Remember, there was a couple years ago we got swayed that cornerback was becoming the more valuable position in the NFL. I think we've reverted back to defensive line, but there was a point where we would say, let's take these corners a little bit higher. Sauce Gardner went at 3 and our Stingley at 3, Sauce at 4 that one year. And now the corners have dropped, but I think you're getting similar, like just incredible value in a Quinyon Mitchell when you take him at 22 as the Eagles did. So I think they're thrilled with that pick. Plus, a Super Bowl champion. So obviously it worked out right away. So yeah, I think the Eagles are set up pretty well at corner with him and Cooper playing that slot role going forward. Brian Thomas Jr. is the next pick 23 overall to the Jacksonville Jags. Famously, we were lower on Brian Thomas Jr. than others, but famously, you came out of it and have reverted the other way, calling him wide receiver 1 in this draft class.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't turned around, I don't think, on any individual player over the course of their rookie seasons more than I have for Brian Thomas Jr. Did not love him as a prospect. Not that I didn't see the traits like the size, the speed, the explosiveness, the twitchiness, but I just didn't know how much. Like he was not asked to do an awful lot at LSU. All the kind of asks, the big asks, were going to Malik Nabers, and I was like, I don't know if he can be more than a sort of vertical route tree type of guy at a time where the league is suddenly pivoting to 2 high safeties, taking away those explosiveness, et cetera, et cetera. So my expectations were not hugely high for a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. And yet he looks special. Like he looks not only like he can be the best wide receiver from this draft class, but that he can be a true everything number 1, that he can be a Jamar Chase that can win at all levels, that can, win with all routes, that can do everything. I mean, he's great after the catch. He's great vertically. He's great doing anything. And look, if you want to compare him directly to Malik Nabers, you would say Nabers definitely had the worst quarterback situation overall, but there were a ton of plays where Trevor Lawrence did not maximize a wide open Brian Thomas Jr. Like
or
he
Mac
already
Jones.
Cooked.
When Mac Jones took over, same thing.
And he could have had way more production than he had last season. Like, as much as good as he was, like it could have been even better. I couldn't be any higher on him than I am right now.
Yeah, I really thought coming in, remember they signed Gabe Davis before the season. They've now since released him. I thought that Brian Thomas Jr. was more of just a vertical threat. I thought that's what he was. Inconsistent hands, ball skills, but man, he was going to threaten things vertically with his size and speed. And he became more of that, right? More than that with his all-around ability. Now we're looking at him and Travis Hunter as one of the more dynamic 1-2 punches. Because, as we look forward, as we're looking at the outlook here, what BTJ showed as a rookie, now having Liam Cohen calling plays, who's done a really nice job moving receivers around, playing to their skill sets. Now having Travis Hunter in there, I think the future is very bright for Brian Thomas Jr. He did not have a 10-target game until week 13.
Yeah.
And he had 10-plus targets from week 13 on last year. So I think the Jags also sense that progression as well, going from, hey, a vertical threat, he can get behind the defense one-on-one or behind zone coverage, whatever it might be with his size and speed, to becoming more of a high-volume threat as the season went on. I expect more of the same with Liam Cohen here.
Yeah, genuinely spectacular.
So that was pick 23.
And by the way, like Trent Baalke, I think overall did a pretty bad job as in his tenure at Jacksonville. He not only secured Brian Thomas Jr. as a parting gift, but did it while trading back to pick up extra. I mean, that one kind of move in combination was a phenomenal parting gift.
That's why this is why I don't judge Steve and Sam for their Brian Thomas Jr. evaluation. Don't judge Howie Roseman for selecting Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson 1 pick early. Don't judge, Trent Baalke for this one move or whatever. Don't judge anybody for one move. But this one move by Baalke was outstanding, right? They got extra draft picks and still got Brian Thomas Jr. at 23. We talked about parting gifts. That is a great parting gift for James Gladstone and the new regime in Jacksonville.
I mean, outside of quarterback, it might be as good a pick as there was in the first round when you factor in the extra capital they got by trading.
Yes, it was a great move. Terrion Arnold was the pick at 24. The Lions traded up to go get Terrion Arnold. And this was interesting at the time, too, because it felt like they had a massive need at corner. They spent this pick to go up and get Arnold. Their second pick, Ennis Rakestraw from Missouri. So they filled those corner needs with this move. I thought Arnold, he had an up and down season. Certainly when you look at the metrics, the penalty numbers, the PFF grade, it's poor. I think there's a caveat to that. But what were your thoughts on Arnold and his rookie season and the outlook going forward?
Yeah, so we loved his man coverage skills in particular in college, and they brought him in. I think they did as well because, like you said, they traded up to get him. They played a ton of man coverage in Detroit last year, and honestly, I thought he struggled with the transition of just like this is the difference between the college level and the NFL level. Even in a high level college conference or team, it's a step up. Like you're just dealing with a whole different level of animal at the NFL level, and those guys put him in a blender quite a bit, and you saw him be extremely grabby. I think that caused him some problems. Like once it gets in your head that I'm getting flagged now, I got to adjust. And I thought he just generally struggled with the transition, with the step up in competition, with the step up in aggressiveness from the officials, like how much they're going to call. And, I don't know if you would say it was a concerning rookie season, but certainly he's got a lot of work to do to get to where they need him to be and where we thought he could be as a prospect.
He had 8 penalties in the first 4 games. The encouraging part is he ended up with 10. So he only had 2 after week 4.
But that adjustment of, oh man, I'm getting flagged for all this now. That I think caused a lot of the bad play where he's like, man, I can't be as aggressive as I want to be. I got to dial it back. And now you're just getting roasted.
So he gave up 792 yards. 4 touchdowns, no picks, broke up 9 passes. The PFF grade ends up at 50.8. It's not great. My caveat there was that they played so much man coverage, and that can torch your grade. It's just I know how the grading can be harsh on man coverage corners. It's harder to do. It's a harder job. So that would be my.
That's what he's there for. That's
I know.
The problem is that's the role he's going to have.
Yeah. So he had a few good games in there, but mostly below average play from Arnold. We'll see if he could bounce back from that. We'll see if the scheme changes a little bit because I think overall he tackles pretty well and he could play zone too. I just thought his hips and route recognition in man was outstanding. And we see cornerback play fluctuate from year to year. So I'm certainly not ready to write him off. I think they just threw him into the deep end and, he was drowning for a bit and came out of it a little bit down the stretch. Again, had some really nice games in there. See if he could add some consistency in year 2.
The one thing that would be a little bit concerning is, so the athletic profile was fine, except the 40 time was reasonably rough, right? He ran like a 4.5 flat, something like that. If you're going to be, you want your man cover corner to have legit speed because he's going to have to go up against receivers that run a 4.3. And if he doesn't get them at the line, now you don't have the makeup speed. Now you're in trouble. Arnold is going to have to be technically sound at the line every single time. Because if a 4.3 guy gets a step on him, he's in trouble.
All right, next pick, 25. Green Bay Packers took Jordan Morgan. He did not play very often. Tackle who played a little bit of left guard, a little bit of right guard. Didn't get to see much of Jordan Morgan. Total snap count, I think, was under 200 for him. It ended up, 186 snaps for Jordan Morgan. Couple starts in there. 59 PFF grade. Not a whole lot to speak about with Morgan's rookie season.
Yeah, almost entirely at right guard. Last game, I think, was at left guard. I didn't stand out necessarily in either direction during the course of those half dozen starts. Yeah, not a whole lot, I think, to give about Morgan. Wasn't particularly impressive, but, wasn't a complete and total liability either. Very much a stick a pin in him and see what he does in year 2.
Was a bit of a surprise pick here, I think, too. A lot of people had him as the in that second round mix. If you were calling him a tackle with Patrick Paul, Kingsley Suamataia, some of those tackles that Roger Rosengarten, some of those other guys that went in the second round. Still jury's out on Morgan. I'm not even sure if he's probably going to have a chance to start this year, or at least compete. But history of tackle to guard conversions for the Packers continued with this Morgan pick here. Graham Barton was the next pick at pick 26 from Duke. A lot of people liked him. as a guard. He ends up as the starting center for the Bucks. Some ups and downs for Barton. I thought he looked great. His first preseason game showed that he belonged. I saw him as a weapon in the screen game. He's really athletic, flews to the second level. He made some huge blocks down the field, run game and screen game. If you go back and watch Bucky Irving's highlight reel of big plays, Barton's at the center of a lot of those plays. But I also thought he struggled with power when straight up nose tackles were right on him. You know, just getting used to snapping the ball, shooting your hands, getting into the nose tackle and controlling him. I think he got overpowered at times and struggled in pass protection at times too. He's trying to see stunts and all the adjustments converting from tackle to center. So I think the overall production was okay. Middle tier rookie grade relative to other centers in recent years. But I would also, you know, in positive land here, I would be encouraged too. He played on a really good offense, overall held his own, adjusting to a new position, and I think he'll continue to progress.
Yeah, I was impressed by him. I thought he was a little bit better than the PFF grading would have him. I was kind of surprised his grades ended up where they did. I think you see there's a reason that rookie centers don't tend to start that much. Like it usually a lot of centers end up beginning their career at guard because you don't have to deal with the kind of mental aspect of the blocking calls and all that kind of stuff. Centers maybe the toughest position on the line in terms of understanding how the whole thing functions and, you know, being able to pick up stunts and all those kinds of things and coordinate with the rest of the line. But he was starting from the get-go, was starting from week one. I think a lot of his lapses or a lot of the bad plays were on the mental side of things. Had quite a lot of penalties as well, which wouldn't have helped the grade. But overall, I think he looks like a guy that's going to be, you know, a high-end starter for them for the next, you know, decade if they want to keep him around as that college tackle that kicks inside. I was really impressed by his rookie season.
Yeah, it was one of those, again, I think if you're a Bucks fan, you just assume it was all great because they had a really good offense. They ran the ball well. They passed the ball well. And if you go back, as the chat's reiterating, yes, I mean, look at a lot of Bucky Irving's big runs. He is at the center of those. He got bullied at times, though, when I went back through the film. He did. But I'm expecting that to get better as he's getting more used to just playing center. So I thought it was a nice rookie season for Graham Barton overall. Darius Robinson was the next pick at pick 27 from the Arizona Cardinals coming out of Missouri. Incomplete grade here for Robinson, you know, was injured. Didn't see the field until late in the year, played a little bit inside and outside, as we suspected, more inside than anything. Very little pass rush production and, you know, showed some of the flashes in the run game where his length is difficult to block. So he had some of that going for him in his limited time.
Yeah, he's a good example of a guy where it's like he missed so much of his rookie season that I'm almost inclined to write off the little that we saw at the end of it. Like, I don't know how close to 100% he was by the time he got on the field. Mike Tomlin, I think, was talking about this with Roman Wilson, the Steelers wide receiver that basically missed, you know, his rookie season. He's like, it's a difficult thing to jump on a moving train for these guys. You know, if you get hurt at the start or in training camp and, you know, the season's going on, it's difficult to get to find the break to get those guys in and like get them a big part of it. I think that's true for a lot of positions, but it felt like that was the deal for Darius Robinson. Like, we reached a point where we threw him on the field, but man, it's hard for those guys to go from 0 to 100 right away. And like you said, we got to see a couple of flashes in the run game, but basically that was it. So, and this is a difficult one from the priors because, you know, Darius Robinson already felt like a guy kind of playing outside of his era, right? A dude that if he was drafted in the year 2000, you know, is a perfect kind of tweener or no, perfect sort of 3-4 defensive end body that in today's NFL, that's like a tweener and might not exist as a position. And then you have him kind of, you know, miss most of his rookie season, not do anything really when he gets on the field. Now you're like, I mean, I'm not concerned yet, but there's certainly no reason for optimism at this point, which is the only downside.
That's it for him on Robinson. Xavier Worthy was the next pick. What a story this was. The Buffalo Bills are on the clock and they trade down. And it's the Kansas City Chiefs who are trading up. And remember what we were talking about at the time. The Bills need a receiver. The Bills need a receiver. There's a whole lot of late first, early second round receivers. Who are the Bills going to take at 28 at wide receiver? 4 are off the board. Ranking 5 through 12 was like a crapshoot. We have no idea who that next guy was going to be. Is it Ladd McConkey? Is it Xavier Worthy? Is it Ricky Pearsall. I mean, actually, there was other names we were talking about.
It wasn't even Pearsall. Yeah,
Pearsall was a bit of a surprise. Is it Jalen Polk? We didn't know who that next receiver was. And the Bills trade down, and the Chiefs come up and get Xavier Worthy, 4.21 speed. Can't believe the Bills let the Chiefs get Xavier Worthy was the talk at the time. And Worthy ended up, I thought, really came into his own as the season went on. I think he was going to be a big, deep threat for Kansas City before he had to fill a little bit more of a possession type role with Rashee Rice going down. But I think we saw at least flashes of that speed showing up on the field.
Yeah, so Worthy's a weird evaluation because he had to do a lot more than he was supposed to do, right, by the end of things. So, number one, you have that story, as you said, of the drafting and Buffalo trading out, Kansas City trading to get him. But theoretically, at that point, you've got Xavier Worthy coming into an offense that already has Rashee Rice as the sort of the guy that saved their season a year ago, that emerged as the number one weapon. Marquise Brown, who they signed and was going to be, the veteran addition to that. And then Worthy can just be the dynamic gimmick player and the deep threat and the speed threat and all those kinds of things. Well, then Marquise Brown is hurt almost immediately. So that changes the dynamic. Now you're going to need Xavier Worthy to sort of step into the Marquise Brown role on the outside and start doing more of that number one X receiver stuff. And then early in the season, Rashee Rice goes down as well with the knee injury. And suddenly Xavier Worthy becomes their number one wide receiver. And he led the team last season in targets and in catches and in yards and touchdowns. Like he had to become the number one guy. And that was never his intended role, certainly when they drafted him. Maybe he could become that guy down the line, but it was certainly not supposed to be what he was doing as a rookie. So because of that, I think you saw some inconsistency, but big play threat was there. The speed obviously absolutely plays. Some of the flaws were there as well, but I think you have to kind of give him a break because from a guy that was supposed to be a role player in this offense, he suddenly had to become the number one passing target.
Yeah, and look, we were nitpicking Brian Thomas Jr. There were a couple times Xavier Worthy was open behind the defense. Remember early in the year, I think Mahomes hit him on one or two. Other times, they were 7 for 21 connecting on 20-plus yard throws, including the playoffs. Of course, he had the garbage time one in the Super Bowl, or a couple in the Super Bowl. But Mahomes wasn't getting him the ball a couple times down the field. Mahomes' deep passing has been very inconsistent the last 2 years. I think Worthy gave him a couple opportunities there, but most of his targets came behind the line of scrimmage, up to 10 yards. I'm expecting more of the deep threat this year from Worthy with his 4.21 speed, especially if Marquise Brown stays healthy and both of those speed receivers on the field. Rashee Rice comes back. He does some of the more dirty work underneath. Same story we were talking about last year. This Kansas City offense can be dangerous. They were at their worst last year, even worse than the previous year as far as the Mahomes era goes. But I would expect a few more of those deep targets for Worthy this year, I think. And he got more comfortable as the year went on, caught a few more catches in traffic, more contested catches. I think he could do a little bit more than he did last year as far as the downfield stuff goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall he had a pretty impressive season.
He did.
Like at his size, he's never going to be, a complete wide receiver that can do everything because you're working with some limitations. But I think he showed last season, given what he did without the help around him, that he can be a really good player for this offense. I'm excited to see what he can do now that he can theoretically step back a little bit and let other people, pick up some of that burden, and we get maybe a closer version of what he was supposed to be as a rookie.
Pick 29, Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma, the offensive tackle going to the Dallas Cowboys. At the time I called this, the riskiest pick of the first round for a couple reasons. I think Guyton was a risky prospect who did not have college production, but had all the tools to eventually develop into a starting offensive tackle, but risky in the fact that the Cowboys needed to directly replace Tyron Smith at left tackle. And they took a project to step onto a team with Super Bowl aspirations and say, hey, go play left tackle, go get him. And the inconsistency played out. The production was poor. He had the most penalties for any rookie since at least 2017 among tackles. He had 18 total penalties, second most in the NFL behind Laramie Tunsil. And before you equate those things, as we've said before, Tunsil had outstanding pass blocking and run blocking grades to complement that. Guyton did not. So he had some struggles as a rookie, and I think that was not totally unexpected.
Yeah, and not I feel sorry for him to an extent because he shouldn't have been drafted that high. Like, this is the problem with that approach to team building. When you don't fill needs before the draft and you go into the draft with needs, you end up having to select players in the first round that now have to come in and be day one starters when that we know their projects. Like, this was part of their MO. This was part of the scouting report. This guy is a developmental project that is going to take some time to work. And those guys don't belong in the first round. They get pushed into the first round because of needs. But if you were doing this sort of honestly, you would be drafting those guys on day 2 and slow playing their development and trying to give them the best chance to succeed. But instead, Dallas is like, nah, free agencies for losers. We fill our needs in the draft. So you then take a guy who just isn't ready to play, is going to give up some bad plays, is going to get beat, and is going to have to try and like survive basically for year one as he develops, as he learns on the job. And, now we have this question mark, like, can he do what Andrew Thomas did? Right. And this is a slightly different dynamic. They reworked his technique. It's not quite the same thing, but like Andrew Thomas got his ass kicked for the majority of his rookie year. And then year 2, we got to see Andrew Thomas become, a high-level player and realize the physical gifts that he had. And now he's one of the better left tackles in the league. Can Guyton go on that journey, or is he just overdrafted because Dallas needed a left tackle?
He also had to move from the right side to the left side. So you throw another guy into that mix who went from the right to the left. So you add that to the transition. And I'll repeat this too. Like, if you were to just pull out, just like when you pull out QB highlight reels, if you pull out Guyton's best blocks, it was like the Senior Bowl last year where his best blocks, his grip strength is incredible. Like, his best looks awesome. Like, he's taking dudes to the ground. He's stoning them at the line of scrimmage. He's not just not losing, but he just loses more often than everyone else, just like he did in college, just like he did at the Senior Bowl. So that's the problem with Guyton right now. And with all offensive linemen, the trajectory is often 3 or 4 years. But Guyton's starting from a lower spot than the guys, the Lathams, the Fuagas, the Fashanus, the guys that we said 2 hours ago on the show, the future's bright for them. Guyton still has a ways to go to get to even where those other rookies were last year. So that's where we are with Tyler Guyton. I'm not sure if he gets there in the next couple of years.
You want to break out your penalty stat on him?
I rambled through it earlier when I was introducing him. But yeah, most penalties for a rookie offensive tackle since 2017. And second overall last year with 18 behind Tunsil's 19. And he got benched, by the way. Guyton got benched for a period of time, either once or twice. He got benched at times last year, but still finished with 18 penalties.
Yeah. So rough rookie season, but I don't blame him for that. It's kind of like, when people say players don't bust, teams bust. Like, I don't believe that. I think it's a bad descriptor for what happens. But in this specific case, like, Dallas are more at fault for Tyler Guyton's rookie season than Tyler Guyton is.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have taken him that high. That's just me. We'll see what happens with the other Tyler this year as well with Dallas. Nate Wiggins at 30. We have 3 more picks. We got this. 3 more picks. Nate Wiggins to the Ravens. I thought this was another good value pick, right? The big question on Wiggins was his size. Super fast, but undersized. He made some huge plays down the stretch for Baltimore, and I thought he just continued to progress as the season went on.
Yeah, I really liked Nate Wiggins. Right at the start of the whole process, when Trevor was giving me guys to take a look at, Nate Wiggins was the guy that I had cornerback 1 on my board from the initial look at people. I really liked him all the way through the process. And I thought we had this run of guys that were like super lightweight corners, Emmanuel Forbes and Cam Dantzler and like these super skinny dudes just getting wrecked at the NFL level and not working out. Nate Wiggins is showing you can make it work if you're 6'2" and 180 pounds max. He played really well. Like, there were some bad games in there, and in particular, I think some of the bigger receivers, some of the big strong dudes gave him some trouble, which you would expect, right? There's only so much you can do to offset physics and a strength advantage. But overall, I thought he more than held his own and looked very good as a man cover corner.
Had a really nice pick 6 against Cleveland in the Week 18 game, the Saturday afternoon game. 8 pass breakups for Wiggins. Definitely gave up some plays there, but ends up with a 72 PFF grade, 69 coverage grade. Held his own in run defense and everything. I thought he did a really nice job overall. And the starter going forward here for Baltimore, one of the starters on the outside. Let's go 2 receivers to round things out. San Francisco 49ers take Ricky Pearsall. This was a surprise for a lot. They were going through this Brandon Ayuk, what are we going to do with him going forward? Was Ricky Pearsall going to be a bit of a fallback plan? And then before the season, Pearsall gets shot when he's trying to, help a burglary or whatever it was in San Francisco?
He was getting robbed, right?
He was getting robbed. He was getting robbed. Yes. And he gets shot, survives, obviously, and comes back later in the season. So it was a difficult season to evaluate Pearsall, and, thankfully ended up able to come back from the preseason incident.
Yeah, wild story. Number one, he was sort of one of the biggest reaches early in the draft relative to the consensus board. A lot of people liked him as a receiver prospect, but they liked a lot of other people ahead of him. So the 49ers taking him where they did, it was a very aggressive move. Then, he goes and gets shot. And I don't want to say that. Goes and gets shot sounds a little bit like it's his fault. I didn't mean it that way.
Yes.
He gets shot. Ends up recovering, working his way back onto the field, plays 11 games overall. But I think, again, it's hard to jump onto a moving train. And because of the way the 49ers were already set up, I think his opportunities were limited. I think we're going to get a much better idea of what Ricky Pearsall can do in year 2. We basically saw one game last season where he was like a significant part of the offense and being fed the football a little bit. So, I don't think we know yet what he's going to be able to do within that offense.
He had 7 explosive plays, those 15-plus passes last year, a bunch down the stretch, 3 against Detroit on that Monday night game where the 49ers were going toe-to-toe with that Lions offense. And it's one of those things like when Worthy got drafted by the Chiefs, it's like, well, the Chiefs will figure out what to do with him. I felt the same with Pearsall because there's so many games at Florida where he was the fastest guy on the field. He was the best athlete on the field pretty often, I thought, for Florida. And you had that type of mix to San Francisco, where Kyle's got a history of getting receivers into space. So I think there's definitely some big play potential there for Pearsall. I don't know if he becomes the high volume type of receiver, but I think as a complementary big play threat, I think he fits really nice with the Niners. And I think he showed some of that when he did come back.
Yeah, I mean, that Detroit game in particular was really impressive. Like, if you're looking for what he could be, that game was a great example of a play, 50% in the slot, 50% outside, was inside, outside, was dynamic, like had a decent volume of yards after the catch in that game as well. Like, that was the game where if you want to see, like, that looked like Florida Ricky Pearsall at the NFL level against good opposition. It's just that because of the gunshot and because of, the 49ers generally, we got to see very little of that as a rookie.
All right. And then the Carolina Panthers traded into the first round to get Xavier Legette from South Carolina. Year 5 breakout for Legette. They had him to visit like 4 times or whatever. All the pre-draft stuff was like, they love this guy. 6'1", 221. He's fast. Inconsistent rookie season. But as we said throughout the draft process or draft recaps, with Tetairoa McMillan coming in, second straight year they've used a first rounder on wide receivers. But I think this helps Legette, become more of the deep threat and explosive player that he could become.
Yeah, and he needs to, because I think that was a disappointing rookie season for him. People were split on him pre-draft. People were kind of all over the map, but there were definitely some concerns in terms of their late breakout, was never a consistently dominant force. When he measured, he was a lot smaller than he was sort of listed as, was supposed to be this giant physical player, and he ends up being 6'1", 222, which is still, like, he's still big, but he's not huge, right? He's not like, you're not dealing with Megatron where suddenly you've got everything changes because the dude is that big. Like, he's just a regular big receiver. And then, so all these things were kind of working against him. And then obviously you've got the disaster of what was Bryce Young early in the season. That's not going to help. They bench him. They go a different direction. A lot of things that weren't working in his favor, but was terrible at the catch point, right? Had a ton of drops, was not a consistent force in terms of contested catches, was sort of 50-50 on those true 50-50 balls. But like, you need to be good at those, and wasn't even able to be like the consistent dominant vertical threat the way, a DK Metcalf style, right? Even if you're not going to be a well-rounded receiver right out of the gate, we need you to do these 2 or 3 things really well, and we can make that work. He wasn't consistently good at anything, and sort of shows him the deficiencies in the game that people thought were there.
Yeah, so 8 total drops, 13% of his catchable targets. That's 6th percentile drop rate, including the one against the Eagles that could have pulled the upset against the Super Bowl champs.
Huge
so
drop.
Yeah, there was inconsistency there, but I think if you let him just win down the field, and drops are inconsistent generally too, like, hey, he'll catch that next time, right? If you continue to get open down the field, you'll catch 8 out of 10, which isn't even a good percentage, but over time the skill is getting open down the field. And I think Legette has some of that. So let him be the big play threat. Let McMillan be the high volume guy. Let Adam Thielen be the high volume guy. And maybe we see better outcomes here going forward. It's not look, receivers can fill specific roles even in the first round. So it's not always the best production that you're looking for out of a first rounder. But I think putting him into a more specific role as a big play threat is the right way to go. I think he could take a shallow cross, 4.39 speed, with some yak ability, give him those opportunities, give him those downfield opportunities with the other receivers doing some more of the dirty work.
And I think he was getting open quite a lot within this offense, which is a big thing. So look, there's a few things that stand in his stead heading into year 2. Number one, Bryce Young's resurgence and what we saw late in the year. If he's able to continue that into next season, immediately Legette's quarterback situation is dramatically better than it was for most of last year, right? So that's working in his favor. Number 2, Tetero and McMillan coming in could be huge for Xavier Legette, because if McMillan can be a high volume guy that moves all around the offense and, becomes their number one target in terms of volume, but not necessarily in terms of, vertical explosive threat, then Legette can go back to being that, like, you're the big play guy. You're going to play on the outside. You're going to be singled up because everyone's focusing on McMillan. Just go out there and toast guys deep down the field and we'll get you the football. So those things, I think, can work in his favor. I'm not ready to write him off, but I think it was definitely a disappointing season, given clearly what Carolina thought he could be where they drafted him.
So look at that. You want to go through the rest of the 7 rounds?
Yeah, we got time for a second round, easily.
That was fun. I like that, going back, and it's a year later, right? After all the pre-draft analysis, let's do some more post-draft analysis. Let us know how much you liked it or didn't like it. Maybe we'll do 2023. We'll give you 2 years of analysis on the 23 first-round picks. But yeah, that was fun. Good times. It's the offseason. Be sure to hit subscribe if you have not already. If you're on Spotify, leave a comment. Appreciate everybody joining the fun and subscribing in the recent weeks here. We're continuing to grow despite the draft being over. And I got my trusty mug, finishing up my second morning coffee.
Just had the espresso.
Nice. Stay hydrated as well. All right. Next week, you want to do, maybe we'll do 2023 if people like this. But we also have some reasons for optimism and reasons for pessimism coming up as well. Some all 32 team shows coming up. And hit subscribe too, because you never know when a George Pickens trade might happen and we need to go live. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's it for us today. Don't forget the schedule's Monday and Thursday. Monday, 9 a.m., Thursday, 10:30 a.m. We'll see you again Monday with more. Check the mic.